School committee to order. The first thing we will do is go through the remote participation checklist. Lisa Jackson has contacted me, and because of geographic distance, I believe you're in Virginia, is that right? Her physical attendance is unreasonably difficult. We have a quorum of members in the room. We have a town room, we have a town phone. You have advanced copies of the documents, and we are, all votes taken will be roll call votes, so please don't let me forget to do that if I do, because we have a lot of votes tonight. And if there are technical difficulties, we will suspend the discussion. Lisa, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good, and can everybody hear Lisa?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So our first item on the agenda is administrative business. We have a calendar up. There are a number of school committee meetings between now and the end of the year, full school committee and subcommittees. There are some terrific community events. And what isn't on here and what will be discussed later this evening are a variety of public open forums related to both the ninth school process. So later tonight we will have there's an additional set of meetings to layer on top of all these for the public process around the ninth school. There will also be, just so people are aware, a set of public meetings around the superintendent search process, but that won't start until the December-January timeframe. Any questions or additions on the calendar?
Yes, the capital subcommittee will be will meet on a whenever possible on a regular scheduled time at 8 a.m. on the second Friday of each month. So there will be a November meeting on
November
Friday
13th,
Friday, November 13th.
and then
December
11th.
December 11th.
Okay, great. Good additions. Anything else? Okay. Good. And then we have a consent agenda. We have past record, and we have a number, the item 2, 1B, II is not here, but everything else, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you have received in advance. So are there any, I have a motion for the consent agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Pollack, second. Ms. Jackson. All right. We need to do a roll call vote. Ms. Jackson? Stram. What's wrong with me? Stram. I knew you when you were Jackson. All right. Ms. Stram?
Aye.
Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Pollack? Yes. Mr. Chang, and Dr. Jackson? Lisa? Well, maybe we lost Lisa. Okay, great. All right, so 6-0, we have the consent agenda. We're going to start with subcommittee and liaison reports. Ms. Stram.
The Finance Subcommittee met this week to review a first draft of 3 different financial policies, all related to student fees and fines. The second one in relation to that was the meal charge policy, and then finally the financial assistance policy. We expect to look at least one more iteration of those before sending them on to the policy subcommittee for review.
Any questions? Okay. Capital improvements.
Well, the capital subcommittee met this past Friday, October 16th, and we spent our time discussing the school's draft CIP. Mary Ellen Dunn had a sort of a bullet list outline of capital improvement program proposals that had been developed by the building department, by Director of Buildings Charlie Simmons, and that was kind of discussed preliminarily, and it is being revised and redrafted and will be brought back, and we will take it up again on November 13th at the meeting that was just discussed. And we have also a vote today which is related to the the public process and the ninth school study, and hiring a facilitator who will help with the gathering of public input throughout that process. And we have a draft contract, or we have a contract that that was circulated, I believe, was?
Yes.
And between Town of Brookline and Pink and Company for the services of Margaret Wood to participate, and she's actually going to be here later tonight. And so I would make a motion that we approve this contract in the amount of $12,210.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second? Mr. Glover, are you seconding it? Great. Is there discussion? My only question is, did we ever determine how this will be paid for?
Yes, it's going to be cost-shared between the Board of Selectmen and the school committee.
Okay.
Not quite 50/50, I think it's 7-5.
Okay.
So, quick question. So I'm assuming that she's got kind of the estimated number of hours, about 74 hours, at $165. I'm assuming that if we go beyond that at our request, it will be billed on an incremental basis.
I would assume so, yes.
It's a good question, because there is a clause in here that says that it shall not exceed $12,210.
But I thought I saw language that says, except for something.
Is there a, good, well, where is that?
Anything above the 12,210 would have to be approved in advance.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
okay.
I had one more question. As the newcomer to this group, I just was curious if this is somebody whom we've used before, or, sort of, how did we come to choose this person? What's her experience and background?
So there's a number of answers to that question. So the contracts under how much do not need to go through a full competitive bid process?
Under 25,000.
Under 25,000. So you can ask people and make them happen a little bit more quickly. This one came with references to us. There were people who had worked with her before, and Kara did our staff, Kara Bruton, our economic planning director, I'm not quite sure what her title is. She gathered the names of a few potential consultants. She got one RFP in that was very, very high in terms of the price. And then she, was gathering names. This name came up. She did a reference check and recommended this person to the board. So it was more of a streamlined process, but there were multiple people who were considered.
And she's currently doing very similar facilitation work with the City of Boston Public Schools with community outreach and community process.
Okay. Any other question or discussion? Okay. So we have a motion, a second. We need to do a roll call vote. Ms. Dram?
Aye.
Mr. Glover?
Yes.
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 Mr. Chang? Dr. Jackson? She's on mute.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Hearing if I had it on mute.
That's okay. I'll try to say we're going to do a roll call vote now a little louder, so by the time it gets to the sixth man on the totem pole, you'll have a chance. So thank you. So it's unanimous, 6-0. We do have contracts to sign, Dr. Connolly, so we can sign these.
And Dr. Connolly, might I ask you to catch us up a little bit in the capital report on the Devotion School Building Committee and process?
I'd be happy to. The Devotion School project is moving along very well. We've had a series of design meetings at the Devotion School with various groups of staff. For example, this coming October 29th, we'll be meeting with all the grade level teachers, K through 1 through 8. So the design team will actually go to the Upper Devotion in the afternoon to meet with the grade 7 and grade 8 teachers. So the design development is at the stage now where the design team is reaching out to the staff, getting their input as far as interior design, furniture, and things of that nature in the actual interior of the school. It is our hope that that process will be finished, I believe it's by December, late December. And the next major step in the process is trying to, once again, find a location, confirm a location, so the grade K to 4 student population can move totally off campus during the construction phase. We now do have a signed letter of intent. We hope to have a signed lease by November 1st, and if that is executed, our strategy would be to move the K-4 population to an 8-story building in Coolidge Corner that during the next 6 months will be built out to operate as a temporary school. Moving in that direction has many, many advantages for the construction project. In particular, as a two-phase project with the K-4 students staying in the building during construction, the construction project schedule would take 3.5 years. We would not have a projected completion date until December 2019. By moving the students off-site, we will reduce the construction schedule to 25 months, which means the completion date would be projected to be August 2018. So that's a huge benefit. It's a cost savings, and also it frees up the old Lincoln School, which we're now calling the Upper Devotion, to meet other town-wide school needs.
Do we have a sense of the cost savings that you mentioned?
The cost savings is approximately $3 to $4 million, I believe, David, in actual construction costs by moving it to a 2-year project versus a 3.5-year project. However, we have to point out, Michael, that there is additional costs to leasing the property and building out that property. And so the bottom line is, although there's a cost savings to the project, we're incurring costs with the option of moving to 30 Webster Street. So the total delta will be, it could potentially increase the cost by about $300,000-$400,000, which we would have to value engineer from the approved upon appropriated project budget.
Okay. So the real savings is time more than anything?
It's time, and I would have to say that we feel it certainly is going to be an improvement in the instructional atmosphere for the kids during that 2-year period. Instead of being in a building under construction, they'll be off-site.
If we were to put a value to the use of Old Lincoln for the 18-19 school year, in other words, if we needed that facility, we didn't have it, and we had to rent something other, that would be more than, that's not calculated in, so that's what we're gaining back, but it's not monetized.
Right, that additional flexibility has value. Understood.
Okay. Good. Anything else? All right, we did the vote. Contracts are coming around to be signed. Okay, we're going to skip curriculum because Ms. Charlepsky is not here. We're going to skip government relations because Ms. Stone is not here. By the way, they are both still downstairs on the public hearing on the warrant articles, which went longer than the hour. Actually, warrant article 16 in particular, which went longer than expected. So they are continuing that, and we'll bring back a report for us soon. So let's go, Lisa, if you can hear me, we're going to do policy review. Dr. Jackson?
Yes, there are no updates to policy. We've not met since our last full meeting.
Okay. All right, and now just in time is Ms. Charlepsky for a update on the curriculum subcommittee, potentially, as she
Races to her chair.
walks quickly and elegantly to her chair. in a poised fashion.
And very quickly states that unfortunately our curriculum subcommittee meeting was canceled. Wednesday morning, so I have nothing to report. And we will be meeting in November, and right now, if I looked at here, I could tell you the
We
date.
did talk about it earlier tonight. It's November 18th.
Thank you. That's all I have to report.
Okay. The superintendent transition process update. We, as many of you know, are completely committed to as much transparency and public participation in the process as possible. Some of you may know that while we have an incredibly qualified and terrific acting interim superintendent, technically we needed to post for that position, and so we have posted for that position. There were 12 applications for the position that we reviewed a couple days ago, right? Was it yesterday?
morning.
Oh my goodness, yesterday morning. We had a school committee meeting yesterday morning. Let me back up. What we needed to do is screen those, and in order to do that, we needed to create an interim superintendent screening committee. So yesterday morning, the full school committee met, and we appointed a 3-member committee, 2 school committee members and 1 non-school committee member. The non-school committee member is Sean Lynn Jones, who is a longtime town meeting member. He happens to chair the advisory committee, which is an important partner to us. But just for a lot of clarity, he was not representing the advisory committee in this capacity. He was representing himself as a resident. But so we appointed a 3-person committee. We immediately thereafter met as the 3-person committee, the interim superintendent screening committee, and we reviewed 12 applications, one of which withdrawn his application after submitting it, which made it 11. There were a number of them that did not hold appropriate certification. There were a number of them who did not meet the criteria. And there were some people who did. So we had a robust discussion. There's additional work that's being done between now and next Thursday. And next Thursday night at 5:30, the screening committee will reconvene. Oh, sorry, it's myself, Ms. Charlepsky, and Mr. Lynn Jones. We will reconvene at 5:30 next Thursday to hopefully vote and recommend a candidate to the full school committee. After which, if it turns out that candidate is a retiree, then there would have to be a process with DESE, with the Department of Education, in order to grant a critical shortage waiver to have a retiree work with us full time, such as Dr. Connolly. So we're all going through that process, and there'll be an update on that on the 29th. So that's the interim superintendent process and the work that needs to be done to conclude that. The second piece of news is that the RFP for an executive search consultant for the superintendent search process has been released and has been, yes, I know, big deep breath. It got caught up in the gears of the purchasing department, but somehow Mary Ellen wrested it out of their hands and got it up on the web. So it's been distributed. Responses are due 2 weeks from today, and there will be a whole process thereafter to screen the search firm. So we will need next week we will vote on a screening committee for the search process, RFP. So we'll create maybe another 3-person committee or more. Then we will screen them. There will be interviews, and then there'll be a selection process. This board will vote the screening. This board will vote the final recommend. Yes, so to appoint or to hire, I guess, execute a contract with the executive search firm. So that's where we are. We are still targeting a late February, early March hire process, which still leaves us in the mix. I will say that there are a number of districts that are currently interviewing finalists right now, but there are many other districts who are not going to be working on this until the end of the fall. So we're on the later side, but we're not out of the range, if that makes sense. Okay, any questions on the superintendent transition / search process? Okay, we skipped over government relations, Ms. Stone, and Dr. Jackson. I should have told the 3 of you. Dr. Jackson's on the phone, so all votes are roll call votes. She can hear us, but she's on mute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope that Dr. Jackson is off mute because she's going to be taking us through this, I believe. Lisa, are you prepared to do that, or were you expecting me to?
MASC?
I am happy to talk through some of it, but I wasn't expecting to do it all, and I'm in a car, so I'm.
Oh, goodness, then don't even think about it. I just need hard copy in front of me because I don't have it. Is it here?
It should be in front of you.
Excellent. Okay. So, Dr. Jackson, our our appointee, our MASC delegate, I briefly went through the resolutions, and they are, so let me just explain for those of you who don't remember or haven't been through this before, what we do with MASC resolutions. These are resolutions by the to the delegate assembly of our professional body, the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. The resolutions that pass come from other school districts, district school committees, or from the MASC executive board itself. The resolutions that pass form the basis of essentially the lobbying activities that the MASC will be doing, legislative activities that they will be doing throughout the year. We have, as a school committee, had resolutions as part of this in the past. We've been grateful to receive the support of MASC in promoting those pieces of legislation. And so we, as a school committee, because we only send one delegate to the MASC conference, what we do as a school committee is consider the resolutions that are put out by the MASC prior to the conference and discuss and vote as a school committee. If we have a strong opinion, we direct our delegate to vote in a particular way. So that's what we're talking about here. There are six. Why am I only seeing?
I think there's 6, and the last one we're gonna not do because we haven't heard back from Nikki.
Okay, there are four. So there are four here to look at. Resolution number 1 is submitted by the Newton School Committee. It's basically asking that legislation be introduced and supported by MASC to engage in a study to determine the best start times for high school students, given the research on the relationship between sleep, school performance, and quality of life. This is sponsored by our Senator Cynthia Cream and other members. Calls for a 9-member commission. Our recommendation to the school committee is that we support this. I know I myself was very upset when the extension of our school day had our late start at Brookline High School moved earlier. My preference would be to move it later, and so I think engaging in a study is certainly the least offensive thing that could possibly be suggested about looking at this issue and making recommendations to school committees for the future.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think our school system starts later at the high school than almost any other one
And many
around here.
others, yeah.
So we're already in line with
And
with
we also,
probably where
we also
they'll end
have
up.
upper devotion starting at 8:30 for the middle school years, which is, I think, 2 years, yeah. So for the purposes of this, I would like to move that the school committee direct our delegate to MASC to vote yes on this resolution when it comes up before the delegate assembly.
I move it.
There's a
moved it.
motion.
You second.
I second, sorry.
Do you want to do these, we have to
I
do them
wanna
as roll
just-
calls? Or do you want to do?
Oh, we have
them
to do them roll call.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's just do them.
all together?
No.
Oh, one-on-one, okay. Go ahead, so you call all the votes.
So, Dr. Jackson.
Oh, see, you're
Gotta
mean.
get
We
up.
were letting her go last so she could get off mute.
Sorry, you can get off mute. Mr. Chang.
Yes.
Yes.
Charlevsky. Ms. Gatto. Ms.
Yes.
Mr. Pollak.
Yes.
Mr. Glover. No, you're out of time. Mr. Glover.
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Kemp. Dr. Jackson.
Yes.
Excellent.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Resolution number 2, submitted by the Framingham School Committee. This is a very, very broad statement by the Framingham School Committee that, that poverty is the biggest obstacle to student achievement in schools and seeks to make a priority of the MASC supporting legislation that would eradicate poverty. Much as this is a laudable goal, we do not think that this is where MASC's limited resources for policy advocacy should be going, and therefore we recommend a no vote on this particular resolution. So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Sir?
Do we have the option of abstaining from this collectively? It is so broad that it's I wonder as to whether there's any meaning there, but just from a policy perspective, to vote down anti-poverty efforts is interesting, I guess. And I'm not necessarily making a motion, I'm just
We are
sort of saying that.
If you would like to make a motion, that's fine. You can change the no, to make a motion to change the no to an abstention as the school committee vote. Accept that as a friendly amendment to the motion and simply replace it if there's no objection.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Great. I will do a roll call on this. There is no objection to replacing the no vote with an abstention vote?
No, I think we just vote the abstention vote because it's an amendment. You
Okay.
vote the amendment,
So,
and then it,
The motion is to vote, to abstain on this vote when it comes up before the delegate assembly. Mr. Chang?
Yes.
Ms. Shaw?
yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Bidwell?
Yes.
Mr. Paul?
Yes.
Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Dr. Jackson?
Yes.
I vote yes. Excellent. So we have a vote to abstain on resolution 2.
Yeah, technically, we're supposed to do that twice, but that's okay.
I know.
Right along.
Technically, I know. Resolution number 6.
So what happened to 3, 4, and 5?
No, these are resolutions.
No, there's missing resolutions here.
Oh,
1, 2, 6, 7.
that's a very good question.
I have 3.
What's the question?
It's
We're
just,
missing on our handout, we're missing,
I think you have the only
here, I have
Resolutions.
it
three other page. You want a complete set?
here.
thank you.
Do you have a complete set?
Okay.
Oh, of that. Oh.
Lisa, for some reason, the October 19th memo to the school committee from you has resolutions 1, 2, 6, and 7, but there aren't other ones on this memo.
It's just the printout.
It's just the printout.
The memo
Okay.
has it.
The original memo had it,
Okay,
right?
so we can
online?
look on the line.
Okay.
Okay, so resolution number 3 is,
It's Lisa's memo.
resolution number 3 is also from the Framingham School Committee. It is relative to, the Framingham School Committee makes the claim that charter schools in particular seek to remove, to counsel out students right before testing who may not do well, and that those students are then absorbed by their regular school districts and then take the tests that have high-stakes consequences in those home districts, and that this presents an unfair bias to the home district. The Framingham School Committee would have the legislators, have the MASC support a resolution, would support legislation to to eliminate this and to tie, if a student is with a charter school for a certain amount of time, to tie their test scores to that school regardless of where they actually take the test. This is, sorry, Lisa?
I was just going to say, the way that the resolution is written, it references the fact that this is the test scores are supposed to go with the receiving district, so to speak, and that's true for all districts. And then there is a very specific call out for charter schools. And in my sort of proposal or recommendation that we vote no, it's primarily because it seems to me that it would apply to all schools, not necessarily calling out charter schools for a specific audit committee to review just their practices. So I just wanted to make that distinction.
Yep, and Framingham is mostly talking about the fact that Chapter 70 funding is based on the students' October 1 enrollment, and so this can distort that as well. This is a complicated issue with many claims within the resolution that are, as Dr. Jackson points out, not necessarily specific to charter schools, even though that's what is called out in this resolution. And so our recommendation and motion is for the Brookline School Committee to abstain on this vote at MASC. So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Okay. Mr. Chang?
Yes.
Ms. Charlevsky? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say my recommendation was actually to vote no, not to abstain, so.
That's not what it says in your, that's not what it says in your memo.
Oh, did I actually put abstention? Then ignore me. Or, not looking at it.
Ignore which you.
We were in the middle of a vote.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Orlovsky, we had a yes.
Yes.
Ms. Scotto? Yes. Ms. Wolf-Dickoff?
This is to abstain.
This is to abstain.
Fine, yes.
Mr. Pollak?
Yes.
Yes.
Ms.
Yes.
King? And I vote yes.
What did Lisa vote?
Dr. Jackson?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Resolution number 4, we're not back to the written yet, is support for an equitable and sustainable placement program for students covered in the under the McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Assistance Act, also submitted by, I didn't realize this was also submitted by the Framingham School Committee. The resolution, as currently stated, is seeking to address too many issues. You all got copies of the resolutions themselves. It is likely to result in addressing very few of the issues that are real and experienced. There is a reason to have an improved method for ensuring equitable funding for homeless children, but it's unclear that the approach that's suggested here in this resolution will get us any closer to those equitable solutions. The recommendation is for a no vote on this.
This is for a placement program. I'm trying to remember, I know I read the article, and Dr. Conley, do you have any more on that? No, okay.
We obviously,
Because I think
we
there may be
obviously
some
do not
things
in a
here.
position of voting against equitable placement for students under McKinney-Vento. So.
Right, and I think it has to do with which district they go to. It's we haven't had as many issues like this, but there are districts that really grapple with this a lot. I assume Framingham is one of them. I just don't know enough about it I'd rather abstain.
Would you like to make a motion to abstain?
Yeah, I think I will do that.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion to abstain on this
And
resolution.
allow Lisa to hear what they have to say there.
And allow our delegate to hear what they have to say. All those in favor of the amendment to abstain?
You have
What?
to do a roll.
I know. Mr. Chang?
Yes.
Mr. Orlovsky? Yes. Ms. Scotto? Yes. Ms. Ditkoff, you don't trust me?
Yes.
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 Dr. Jackson?
Yes.
Okay. We have now, I'll do this right, a motion to abstain on this. All those in favor?
Oh.
Mr. Chang?
Which one is it?
This is the
Same one.
Yes.
What you put on your thing? Yes. Put on your,
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Jackson?
Yes.
And Ms. Stone votes yes as well. Okay, thank you very much. Number 5, why is this not acting like my, oh, there we go, it's that way. This is, resolution number 5 is a tax reform ballot question. This is essentially putting MASC on record as supporting the Raise Up effort to reform taxes in Massachusetts as in a way that would, through a constitutional amendment, in a way that would earmark funds for education and transportation. It's designed to have a higher tax on those who would earn more than $1 million a year. This reform has been proposed many times in Massachusetts and not supported. The underlying idea that equity cuts both ways, those who pay with more pay more, and those who have less pay less for shared services such as education and transportation, is worth supporting. It is an effort to amend the Constitution because the Massachusetts Constitution actually has written into it that we cannot have indexed income tax. So it would have to amend the Constitution in order to put this into effect. The recommendation from your representatives is a yes vote on this from the Brookline School Committee, and I move that.
I'll second.
Any questions, discussion?
Sorry, but we're voting yes on the stand.
We're voting yes on the, this is submitted by the MASC Board of Directors to put the MASC on record as supporting the effort to reform taxes in Massachusetts in a way that would earmark funds for education and transportation. Any questions? Mr. Chang?
Sure.
Yes. Ms. Charlovsky?
Yes.
Ms. Scotto? Ms. Ditkoff?
No.
Mr. Pollak?
Yes.
Same.
I vote yes. Dr. Jackson?
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. That was 1 abstention, 1 no, and 7 yes. Resolution number 6. I think I'm back to hard copy, and you can have your, thank you so much for that. This is, this is to promote the idea that the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education include member of a sitting school committee member from one of the 300-plus school committees in Massachusetts. It's unclear, frankly, while it would be perfectly nice to have a school committee member on that board, it is unclear whether that would have the effect, whether the effect of having a sitting school committee member on this board would be consequential. This is one member from more than 300 school committees representing school committees. It's not clear that a public official can or should serve on such a committee either. I know that when Ruth Kaplan was a member of our school committee and was appointed to the state board, she had to resign. Or maybe she just chose to, but I believe it was a conflict. In any event, none of the current members are publicly elected officials. We don't know whether that would be a conflict. Presumably, they will discuss this at the MASC Delegate Assembly if it is. But because of the limited effect this would have, the formal vote from the school committee, the recommendation is abstain. Our delegate, as an individual, would probably be welcome to vote her own beliefs in that. But anyway, the vote from the Brookline School Committee would be an abstention vote. So moved.
I'll second it, and then I want discussion.
Yeah.
But maybe I won't second it, actually, because I want to change it, so I guess I can't second it.
Second for Ms. Scotto. No, Ms. Charles.
I actually do think that there should be a school committee member on the board. In terms of current members, it's not allowed, from my recollection, it's not allowed to have a school committee member on the board. However, if you look at the Department of Early Education and Care, Beth Childs was a school committee member here and on that board. It's almost the same sort, yes? At the same time. And she certainly had to recuse herself if there were any money issues that were involved. But other than that, that was not an issue. There is not conflict, and actually it can add to the conversation, I think, at the Board of Education. So I would like to propose that we vote yes on this.
That is a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
No, it's not a motion.
Oh,
I'll make it a motion.
Well, we have a main motion on the
Okay,
table.
so I'd
You
like
can't
to
have another
amend
main
the motion.
No.
Okay,
You have a main motion, which is no.
okay.
No, it's abstain.
It was abstain, sorry. So you're saying you don't want to abstain, that's a speech.
I'm
That's
saying
not-
I want to amend the
Motion.
main motion to
Okay.
say that we would support
Okay.
this.
So then we vote on,
Right, that's what I said.
If it's second.
if it's
If it's
seconded.
second.
Do I have a second?
Can you clarify the vote, because I've lost track?
Ms. Orlovsky was moving to replace the abstain vote with a yes vote on Resolution 6, the school committee member on the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. And we are waiting to see if there is a second for that motion. We do not have a second at the table for that motion, and so we will not consider that motion. We will move to consider the main motion on the table, which is to recommend an abstention vote when this comes up before the MASC Delegate Assembly.
So further discussion?
Is there further discussion? Ms. Didkoff?
Thank you. So I appreciate the idea of school committee representation on the Board of Education. I think it's important. I do believe that there's a conflict of interest if there are votes on the Board of Education that affect the district that that person is coming from, money or otherwise. There are many, many other ones, policies or other things, and it seems to me that it's a conflict of interest to have that person representing the Commonwealth and at the same time representing, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their town. But I would be interested in a former school committee member sort of seat where that person didn't have a fiduciary responsibility to their town. So I don't support this motion. I would actually vote no on this motion, but if the MASC resolution said a former school committee member who no longer has a fiduciary responsibility to their town, I do think that that expertise is important for the Commonwealth to hear.
Actually, there is one right now that he just got appointed.
But that's different from this.
No, I hear you,
anyway.
I hear you.
So
I think that
I'll
the-
move it as an amendment if anybody
I
else,
think
if anyone wants me
pretty
to, but otherwise I'll just vote no.
Well, because there's no seat set aside for a former school committee
Right.
member, but former school committee members do frequently serve, so do you want to make a motion that there should be a seat set aside for a former?
I'm
school
happy
committee
to have further discussion on it if other people are interested in that idea, but but otherwise, no.
member? Anybody else like to entertain that as a formal motion?
So,
Okay.
that's fine, it's
Is
just
there
a,
any other discussion about this particular resolution? Okay, then, we will take a roll call vote. The main motion is for to abstain on this when it comes up. Mr. Chang?
Yes.
No.
Ms. Scotto? Yes. Ms. Didkoff?
no.
Mr. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Ms. Strand?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Dr. Jackson?
Yes.
Do we have a vote?
Okay, so we have 2 noes, 7 yeses. So the recommendation is for an abstention vote. Resolution number 7, relative to the Teaching Strategies Gold Assessments for Kindergarten Students. We were unable to get input from Vicki Milstein before this meeting. This was a very complicated issue that that frankly I did not feel, and Dr. Jackson did not feel competent to make a determination on one way or the other. And so we have no recommendation. If Ms. Charlevsky or anyone else who knows something about the teaching strategies referenced here,
I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough
Not
to
enough
really
to
know
recommend
to guide the committee in the right direction.
So my recommendation would, if we do not direct our delegate to take a position, then we leave it up to her good judgment at that meeting to listen
And maybe
vote
to
accordingly.
also speak with Vicki before the meeting to
If
to
that's
get
if
input.
that's a
I think
possibility.
I forwarded something that Vicki had written, but it's still very complicated, even when you read it. There's no clear answer on this one.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So we have no recommendation, and we have no need for a vote unless someone objects to the idea that our delegate would use her own common sense in approaching a vote at the delegate assembly. Okay, thank you all. That concludes our MASC.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stone. Thank you, Dr. Jackson, for all of the work you did in reviewing them, and you have our gratitude for representing us in 2 weeks. Okay, it is now time for public comment. I don't know if anyone signed up in advance for public comment. Thank you. We have 5 people signed up for public comment. We have 15 minutes, 3 minutes each. Excellent. Okay, so Maya Sakar.
So we just have a student group that wants to come up.
Okay, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
So we would like to comment about what happened with Mr. Chen, a Driscoll teacher. So first of all, we'd like to say thank you for supporting our fight and for letting us know that we have a voice. We would like to inform you that what happened here was way, way bigger than Mr. Chen. What happened here was letting hundreds of students know that they have a voice, and that can't be taught in school. Thank you.
We would also, can I ask that each of you state your name, and because we need to put it in the record? It's okay, and maybe just write it down on a piece of paper and give it to Ms. Klein.
My name is Nadav Shavit.
Thank you.
So my name is Anna, and I would also like to thank you all for taking your time to listen to all of us and considerate how important this is to us. And Mr. Chen has really changed most of our lives, and he's really important to us, and you've really done. We really want to thank you deeply. My name is Donna Eberlitz, and we could not have brought back Mr. Chen without your consideration and without you all sitting here listening to us talk for hours about how much we love him and how much we love his teaching and how much we want to be heard. And then you listened to us and considered what we thought and made the decision to bring Mr. Chen back, and that really changed everything at Driscoll, so thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Maya J. Sekar. That's Mayasekhar. And as my classmates have just made you aware of, we are here not to protest because we've clearly gotten what we wanted, but we would like to thank you for your ears, for your consideration, and we're also here to, we also understand that many of you were not as pleased with this decision, but to bridge that gap, to unify our community now, we would like to say thank you, present you with these cards and some sweets, and sugar makes everything better. So we have, Dear Mr. Connolly and Board, thank you for listening, considering, acting, informing, and empathizing, and for deciding in the best interest of the students of the Michael Driscoll School. Many thanks, all of these people.
Thank you, Ms. Sekar, and we are not allowed to accept gifts over $50, but I'm guessing that this one, so, very kind, thank you.
I don't think it's 9 times.
No, it's definitely not 9 times 50. Good, thank you very much. And as you know, it's our policy that we don't comment on public comment, but thank you for coming. Alan Casey.
I'm here with my wife, Vanessa Kirsch. Also just want to thank you, Dr. Connolly, and members of the committee, on behalf of the parents who were here previously to speak to you all and who've been engaged in this. We really appreciate that you listened, first of all, to our children and empowered them in this process, and that you really considered all the points of view in this situation. There would be more parents here, but there is a major event at Driscoll tonight, I think, as you know, Susan, for the 8th grade. So, and people decided it was really important to support the school. So we said we'd come and speak on behalf of the parents that were involved with this. And we know there's still work to do to unify the school, and we're all committed to that. And we really appreciate the fact that you all, with your incredible dedication to education, really considered everything in this situation. And just want to express our gratitude for your leadership. And you clearly work really hard. I mean, because you're here again this week, and I know you're doing all these meetings. So also just want to thank you for being such incredible, dedicated public servants, and also to you, Dr. Connolly, for stepping in as an interim superintendent. Already your leadership has made a huge difference, at least for one group of students and parents in one school, and we're very grateful for you for using your experience in this situation and on behalf of this district. So thank you.
Thank you. I really have nothing to add, it's just that mostly now just focused on reuniting the school and the whole community. We realize that it's not an easy decision either way. There are winners and losers, and we want to make sure that everybody feels, in the end, proud of the outcome. And that's the best thing we can do, is have our kids succeed and do well. And they've learned a lot through this process, and we're really proud of them. So, and we're very thankful to all of you, so thank you.
Thank you. Scott Jacobson.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, committee. Thank you. My name's Scott Jacobson. I live on Gibb Street in Brookline. I have 3 kids at the devotion school, a 3rd grader, 2nd grader, and kindergarten. I'm here to urge the committee to approve the resolution in support of the moratorium on high-stakes standardized testing. By pausing the testing, the high-stakes testing now, I think Massachusetts has a real opportunity to remove unnecessary pressure from students and teachers and parents and families as well. I think the pressure that the high-stakes testing brings about limits our children's experience of learning at school and restrains our teachers from being the best that they can be for our kids. So if the town meeting can pass this warrant article, I think Brookline can set an example for cities and towns throughout the state. And by taking a stand against high-stakes testing now, as a town, we can be forward-thinking, we can be confident, we can be fearless, and we can stand up in support of an opportunity to take the time, invest energy, and think critically about the testing regime and how we really feel about it. And then we can make a determination about how we should proceed. I think it's a testament to our town already that we have not accepted the park testing regime yet. So that, I think, is a great sign. I think Brookline is a progressive place, and I think we can do more. We also have a reputation for great public schools throughout the state and the country, so I think we have a unique position here to stand up, and what we say carries a lot of weight on this issue. So I think we need to lead on this issue. I'm worried that some parents and administrators will think, well, it's not a problem in our town, we do well on the tests, it's okay, but I think it's not a matter of how successful we are at jumping through hoops, but what are the hoops that we're asking our kids to jump through? And I think we need to take the time to examine and learn and think critically and come to a decision after that process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. Deborah Fung? Where did Deb go? She was here a minute ago. Okay, is there anyone here, that's all of the people we have signed up to make public comment. I'll try to see if Deb needs a minute. Is there anyone here who wishes to make public comment who has not signed up? Okay. Mr. Benka?
Yeah, I just say that we certainly...
Can you come up? Why don't you make public comment?
A number of individuals who are concerned about Article 16 spoke at the public hearing before the subcommittee, and I was prepared to leave it at that. So.
Okay, so Mr. Benka noted that a number of people who are interested in the warrant article already spoke earlier this evening at the public hearing on the warrant article. I think that was all. Did you have another? Do you want to make public comment for 3 minutes while we're here, or no?
I think there are people on both sides here, and if we open the door at this point, it probably would protract the meeting.
Okay.
I assume that the chair of the subcommittee will essentially report what.
Right. So yeah. So when we do in the next 2 agenda items from now, we will have a proposed vote on the warrant article. There will not be public comment on that time. Let me put it this way. If there is anybody here who wishes to make public comment, I will take it. If it's already been made downstairs, it will be summarized shortly. Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Our student report, Mr. Khan, we are delighted. We haven't heard from you for a while. We assume many things are happening at the Brookline High School. We're excited to hear about them.
Powdered pastries before you.
Powdered pastries right before speech making can be challenging.
But there are many things happening at the high school. We are eighth of the way through the school year. About the first quarter progress reports just came out, and last week was parent-teacher night, and on this Tuesday night, 191 of the seniors were inducted into National Honor Society. That's about 2/5 of the class. And each member had a 3.3 GPA or more. It had to fulfill several tenets of the society, like character, leadership, scholarship, and service. Yeah. And one thing that's new this school year is that all students have received a @PSBMA account, which links us to the Google platform for Google Drive, and it has cloud storage. And I think teachers got on this last year, and some teachers are beginning to integrate this. It kind of goes along with the increase in technology, along with the mounted projectors and Chromebooks that are now in many classrooms at the high school. And another thing occurring this year that is not new, but it has a very strong show, and it's race reels. Last week it showed a movie about a woman who attended Weston High School through the METCO program, and she's now a teacher, and she came to speak. And there were many, many people there, and there was lots of conversation going along around this. And then the final part of my report is a lot of people have been asking me what way the student voice is going to get, the students are going to get input in the superintendent search. Many of us are wondering, and we're curious. And do you have an answer now, or not this time?
So we haven't yet set up the process, but there will be various focus groups that are set up for different constituents, for teachers, for students, for close partners like the Brookline Education Foundation and 21st Century Fund, town folks. So there are a number of people to include in the process. But yes, students are absolutely on the list in terms of having an important voice in the process.
And will you find some way to publicize that to the students? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're not there yet. It won't start until the sort of December timeframe, so it's not imminent.
Long way. Okay.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Khan?
So I'm wondering, last year I got the notices about race reels, but I don't remember getting this one. And I'm wondering if you could make sure the school committee gets it, because I think it's an important effort at the high school to talk about race, to talk about issues. And I, for one, would like to at least try and see if I'm available, at least to be able to come.
Okay, I'll pass that along.
Great. Ms. Dunn.
Say congratulations.
Thank you.
Is that a motion? Wonderful. Congratulations. Thank you for your update, and we look forward to hearing more in our coming meetings. Our acting interim superintendent's report, Dr. Connolly.
Thank you. You have before you tonight a 2-page spreadsheet, and let me give you a little background on this. This is an enrollment projection report. And for many, many years, as we start the budget process, I've always developed a enrollment projection, which helps generate the projected numbers for the next school year that helps our budget holders project their needs. I felt it was important to do that this year, not only for the budget, but because of the ninth school study. The ninth school study is a very important study that's going to have a major impact on the Brookline school system. And I felt having one additional, very recent enrollment projection certainly wouldn't hurt. And so what you have before you tonight is a copy of what we call the worksheet of this enrollment projection. An enrollment projection really looks at past data and assumes that past trends will help identify the future trends. And I would like to point out to you a few things on the worksheet itself. First of all, that if you look at, they have grade level survival rates between K and 1 and 2, 2 and 3, and so on and so forth. And at the middle of the page, it gives you the average 10-year survival rate from grade to grade. And you'll notice, starting with K to 1, all the way through the 12th grade, they're all very, very close to stable. For example, looking at grades 4 to 5, it's a 1.0, which means it's even. If we have 500 children in grade 4, it's projected to be 500 students in grade 5. And there's a very slight deviation from grade to grade. So the question is, why is our enrollment increasing so dramatically if our survival rate from grade to grade is pretty stable? There's a very modest, slight increase. And the answer is, now we refer you back to my superintendent's report, where it says Chart A. If you look at the worksheet on my chart, you'll notice that the real factor that's increasing the enrollment in Brookline is our incoming kindergarten enrollment. For example, in the last 5 years, starting with 2011, in June 2011, we graduated 444 seniors. In September 2011, 2 or 3 months later, we enrolled 546 kindergarten children. That's an increase of 102. That year, we had an total increase in K-12 population of 161 students. And of that 161, 102 was driven by the kindergarten enrollment. In 2012, in June, graduation was 466 seniors. A few months later, in September 2012, we enrolled 666 kindergarten children. That's an increase of 200 students. Losing 466, gaining 666. That year, our total increase, K through 12, was 237 students. And of that 237, 200 were driven by the kindergarten enrollment. I'll jump to 2014. In 2014, we graduated 417 students. We enrolled, a few months later, 684 kindergarten children for a delta of 267 students. That year, our total increase was only 217. So actually, the kindergarten enrollment exceeded the total increase that year, K to 12. This year, 2015, we graduated 488 seniors. We enrolled 633 kindergarten children for an increase of 145 students. Our enrollment this year grew by 169 students, 145 of which were associated with the kindergarten enrollment. So clearly, it's the kindergarten enrollment that is driving our increase. And that enrollment is projected to continue steadily for the next several years. And so as those grade levels, 600 to a class, advance through the grade levels, it'll eventually impact the middle school and the high school. If you look at the next chart, I took the actual numbers of students by grade level and converted it to classroom needs. Currently this year, in 2015-2016 school year, our K-8 enrollment is 5,466 students. And we have 255 available classes, plus we're leasing 5 additional spaces, 2 modular classrooms and 3 rental spaces at the Pierce School. So we have a total of 260 classrooms. Divided by that 5,400 students, system-wide class average is 21 plus system-wide. But as we saw in last week's report, the class size range throughout the school system is somewhere between 19 to 17 to 27. And so clearly, it's somewhat deceiving when you see a class size average of 21. You have to stop and realize that that's the average. We have some that are as high as 27, some a little bit lower. If you move ahead 5 or 6 years, which is this enrollment projection, it projects out 6 years. To the FY21 school year, the 2020-2021 school year, the K-8 enrollment is projected to be 6,094 students. By that time, we will have 265 classes because the devotion school with an additional 5 classes will come online. And if you divide those 265 into the 6,000 students, you'll see that the system-wide average is 23 students. And again, the range will most likely be somewhere between 22 and 30 students. So clearly, the enrollment projection that we're looking at, and is also being looked at by the Ninth School Study, is supporting the need for additional classrooms. Now, over the past several years, we've provided that need, what would be called build-in
Expand in place.
Expand in place. We've added modulars with split classrooms, but we've pretty much exhausted that possibility. So clearly, looking at this 6-year enrollment projection, we're looking at a potential shortfall of rooms up to in the 20s. A night school might be the only viable solution for that magnitude of classroom need over the next 6 years. This enrollment projection, as I mentioned earlier, will be used during the budget process, but I thought it was also worthwhile to do because there is an enrollment projection in the Civic Moxie report, and I'm pleased to report that our most recent numbers are very similar to the numbers in that report. The only difference is, in our case, we have also projected new housing growth in this report, so our numbers are a little bit higher 6 years out than the Civic Moxie report. But both reports clearly demonstrate the potential of a shortfall of 20 plus, 25 plus classrooms over the next 6 years. Any questions?
So just on that one, so there are a couple things, just so everyone's clear, that this still does not solve. It does not bring beeps back into the building.
Right.
It does not get class sizes back down. It stays at the 21 average, which has a wider distribution than where we had been. So the 27 classroom number. So the anchor that is of we need 27 classrooms, a 3-section building. Just so we're clear, what's not included in 27 is the BEEP classrooms, for example. So to bring the BEEP classrooms back, it would be in addition to the 27. What isn't included in here is class size assumptions that would bring our class size back down to the 19-20 range, and on average, it stays at the 21 range. The other thing that isn't in here is the suboptimal, any dealing with the suboptimal classrooms, a number of which are dealt with the devotion renovation, but there are others around town. We have, Dr. Connolly and I have talked a little bit about the presentation we saw last year on suboptimals and how we had a number of questions about it, and so there's sort of a new look at that definition, bringing that definition back to us to make sure that it's a definition that we all support and endorse, and then a look at it. But that's not included in here either. But that the need for that number is we've brought back on the table at some point. On the new growth, can you just say a word about new growth? Just because the assumptions of class size of 6, if you all remember, the assumption of the class size of 650 did not include new growth. It did not include 40B projects, it did include a number of things. And since that 650 number was presented a while back now, there are a number of 40B projects in the pipeline, and we'll hear a little bit more about it later tonight. But do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
I'd be happy to. In fact, when the asterisks at the bottom of the worksheet address that issue. In FY18 and FY19, we have adjusted the cohort enrollment projections by approximately 90 students per year, roughly 10 students per grade, K through 8, because the projected new residential growth would suggest it would generate approximately 180 additional students to the school system. When you use a cohort survival technique, as I mentioned earlier, the assumption is that what's happened in the past will continue to happen in the future unchanged. But when you have new growth, that's a change factor, and you have to adjust your numbers accordingly. So in our report, which I don't believe was factored into the Civic Moxie report, we have adjusted our numbers to address or to deal with that potential new growth in FY18 and FY19 of approximately 180 students when those new residential dwellings come online.
Okay, more to come. Oh, sorry, the other thing that this doesn't do is it does not bring back the, how many people from Webster Place? 42? 40-some employees from Webster Place? It's because we've displaced a number of people to capture classrooms. We've displaced a number of functions, and so this doesn't bring those back either. This assumes they stay in rental.
That's right. Those are non-classroom.
Those
are office spaces.
Right, but they had been occupying office spaces, classroom spaces, so we've recaptured as classrooms. So this doesn't bring back staff. It leaves staff in rentals.
Well, what we would hope, if we did get a ninth school, a 27 additional classroom school, it could potentially eliminate the need for modulars in rental space. That's yet to be determined.
It's except the rental space that's not for pre-K.
That's
The
right.
K-8
That's
rental
right.
space.
K-8.
K-8 rental space, not BEEP rental space, not admin rental space, K-8 rental space. Is that right?
For example, modulars might be able to be phased out if the 27 classrooms meet our needs.
Right. And presumably, as we go forward with the conversation about how we're going to accomplish those 27 classrooms, we'll get a breakdown of what the ongoing costs of the rentals are. I mean, as we project out what we need, right? We're going to have a side-by-side of what we save by
Cost
bringing
comparison,
some
yes,
cost comparison.
yes.
Yeah, so Ms. Dunn has committed to Mr. Pollack, so that the capital subcommittee will take a comprehensive look at our rentals. They all have different price per square foot, they all have different lease terms and whatnot, so looking at that comprehensively, and it's roughly at, what, $1 million a year run rate on terms of rentals, and figuring out what that looks like over the long term is part of that as well.
Great, thank you.
Number 2 on the superintendent's report, at our last meeting, there was a question about some isolated enrollment numbers. I think it was the Runkle School. We had an odd 26, and I did look into that as I said I would, and what we had thought the reason was last week, it was in fact the reason. The numbers reported on the October 1 enrollment report reflects homeroom enrollments, and the homeroom enrollments are not necessarily the class size enrollments. In fact, Mr. Stoddard reports that at the Runkle School, the classes are closer to 20 to 23, and it certainly is not a 26. Item number 3, there was questions about how the social studies textbook that we're currently using was selected. And with Dr. Fisher-Mueller's help, we investigated that. I'd like to share with the committee what the process is. Last year, the textbook utilized as part of the 5th grade social studies curriculum was up for renewal. In September 2014, Dr. Tignell, K-8 Social Studies Coordinator, began the new textbook adoption process. With the assistance of 5th grade educators, Dr. Tignell followed the established procedures to determine a suitable replacement textbook. 4 textbooks were reviewed and rated against criteria aligned to school committee policy. Three of those textbooks were piloted in our 5th grade classrooms. We are pleased to report that following the final review of the piloted texts, it was determined that the best option for use in Brookline classrooms would be My World, Building Our Community by Pearson. An additional review of this textbook by external experts further solidified our choice. It is important to note that our fifth grade educators do not rely solely on this textbook for their lessons. Our educators supplement the textbook with additional instructional materials, including, for example, primary source documents that represent multiple perspectives on historical events. So clearly, this is a textbook adoption procedure that's part of our process in Brookline, and it was followed with the grade 5 social studies textbook. Any comments? Question? Number 4, today's students, tomorrow's teachers, TSTT program at the high school. Also at the last meeting, it was mentioned briefly that the program had been discontinued, at least the TSTT regional office had been discontinued. And we were questioning what impact that would have on our local program. I had the distinct pleasure of meeting 2 very, very committed teachers this past week, and we had a chance to talk about it. Malcolm Cawthorn and Jeanette Sargent Lendor, Brookline High School TSTT mentors, facilitators, committed to continuing Brookline's commitment to this worthwhile program in spite of the recent closure of the regional TSTT office. They indicate this is the 5th year TSTT has been in operation at Brookline High School. There are 6 juniors in the remaining cohort who have been working towards understanding teaching and the powerful influence of teacher of color. This cohort has visited numerous colleges in Massachusetts and attended workshops to increase general knowledge and skills while understanding how these skills will have benefit in the world of education. Malcolm indicates this year, in spite of the closure of the regional office, they will continue this general model, but tailor it more to the needs of our cohort. The students have a wide array of interests in education, and the mentors want to address and cultivate these intellectual curiosities. They have already examined different types of jobs in education, counselors, administrators, higher education, union leaders, advocates, and brought in speakers to help understand these varied careers and explore these roles in different school systems. The students are eager to look at current issues in education that might affect their future as educators. Students have expressed a want to learn about special education, ELL, clustering, tracking, cultural competencies, and curriculum development. Malcolm and Jeanette intend to continue on the path that they have been following through the TSTT, meet the real needs of these students so they will, we hope, return and teach in Brookline. They are committed to working with these young people until they graduate in June 2017. Jeanette shared the following information about last year's first graduating class cohort. One student is attending Pace University, which is a TSTT partner school. A second TSTT graduate from Brookline High School is attending Benjamin Franklin Institute and recently contacted Ms. Lender to indicate he was writing his first school paper on the TSTT program in Brookline High School. 2 other students are also enrolled locally, one at Boston University and one at Salem State. So clearly, this TSTT program has made a difference and hopefully will continue to make a difference with our cohort of students. I might also add, in addition to the TSTT program at Brookline High School, we have a committee led by Ms. Holman and Dr. Vec currently creating strategies to actively recruit teachers of color. So we're certainly committed to this goal.
All right, and on that one, we will have a hiring profile, a full hiring profile analysis next week at our meeting. And Dr. Allen typically does that in the fall, and Ms. O'Sullivan will do that next week. Ms. Charlepsky.
I'm a little unclear. I understand the program has gone away and they're continuing this year, and there's juniors, but will it continue after that?
Through the graduation.
Just through their graduation, but it won't continue after?
We do not have a new cohort starting at this point in time.
Uh-huh.
We
And
could
we have
certainly-
to have the national in order for it to really be a
We're going to investigate that and look into it. Clearly, they're doing some great work. We'd like it to continue. We're going to have to investigate that.
Okay.
But in the meantime, we're committed to our existing cohorts until they graduate.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Dunn?
How are we funding that if we're not getting?
I think it was locally funded.
It was locally funded.
It was.
Okay,
And these teachers have already been, we've already committed the stipend this year.
Right,
so
no,
that-
I
yeah.
understand that. I didn't know whether the regional office provided us any support or whether it works the other way around, whether we.
I think it's locally funded.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Connolly, if I
Yes.
could ask one question about the textbook selection process. I just wonder, I don't know the answer to this, so maybe Mr. Orlovsky or Ms. Gatto, who have both chaired our curriculum subcommittee, can answer.
Or Dr. Fisher-Mueller.
Or Dr. Fisher-Mueller. I'm just curious what the curriculum subcommittee's role was in that decision. I know we don't choose them. I know that that's not part of the law anymore.
Dr. Fisher-Mueller, do you want to just briefly state the school committee's role or lack thereof?
Yes, the school committee's role is to set policy, and then we create the guidelines and move through that process with those guidelines, and then the recommendation is made to me and then to the superintendent.
Did you want to finish?
If there were a budget issue that, pertained to this, then we would take it up, but there was no.
Well, but we don't. We don't take up budget issues on individual textbooks.
Not an individual textbook.
No, I wasn't
no.
talking about the budget issue on the individual textbook or the cost of replacing. We have line items for
Right.
replacing the textbooks, and that's perfectly appropriate. But because there was an issue with content, and this was of particular interest, certainly of this committee and of the public, I just wondered whether in this case there was any, whether we could have the possibility to see the new textbook. Not to make a decision on it, but it would just be interesting to see what was chosen.
I'd be happy to share the textbook with you or have Dr. Tegnell actually do that, but I think even more importantly, or as importantly, share with you the process of review of these texts and where we landed, and including in that process seeking outside expert input and the conversation about supplementing.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Very good.
Great. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Dr. Connolly. So we have about 15 minutes to do a half an hour's worth of agenda items. Well, let me ask it as a question. Are there ones that it's probably better to do one or two of them all the way and postpone the rest, because we do need to start with the selectmen at 7:30. What is your pleasure, Ms. Doan?
So I believe in 15 minutes it is not even remotely possible to do justice to the comments and concerns that we heard downstairs during our public hearing on warrant Article 16. I would like the opportunity to have the members who were there and myself to share with you a number of the things that were said and to spend the time on that it clearly deserves. And so with your permission, Madam Chair, I would defer that to our meeting next week. As I said to the members at the hearing, I thought there were, just so everybody here who wasn't there knows, there were many, many issues raised. Some of them, certainly, some of us are familiar with before. We had about 15 people speak. Many of those, half of those, I think, were teachers in the school system. Everybody who spoke had a very deep understanding of some form of the system. And I think we would do ourselves a disservice not to have a robust conversation about what they brought to the table for our consideration. So I would defer that, and I will try in the intervening week to do an advisory committee-like memo on that hearing so that we have something more focused to look at from our own public hearing.
So that makes sense. The advisory committee has already voted on this. I do believe the selectmen are waiting for us to some extent
I
to.
believe they are,
and I
so if
think
we
they
take it
have
up
a-
early next Thursday, we will beat them to the punch still. We can report to, oh, no, sorry, that's next Tuesday.
Right.
Maybe they can defer. I don't know if they want to, or maybe they will feel that the advisory committee gave it a substantial look. In any event, there is too much to talk about, and so the selectmen will just have to forgive us.
Okay?
I'm sorry, Rebecca, can you just say quickly what you're recommending, that we don't discuss these now because we need to have a robust?
No, only Article 16. I believe we can do justice to Articles 6 and 7. We will do our very best.
Okay, you have 12 minutes.
Is that clear, Lisa?
Yes, thank you.
We did meet on the 13th of October in open session to discuss and hear from the public and petitioners on several pending warrant articles. The purpose of the hearing was to determine whether to recommend that the school committee take a position on a warrant article. We are under no obligation to do so, but when warrant articles pertain to issues of particular concern to the school committee, sometimes we elect to take a position. So our discussion and recommendations from that meeting, and I want to thank the advisory committee for some of the concise descriptions of the warrant articles that I shamelessly borrowed in writing up these notes. So Article 6 was submitted by the Parks and Recreation Commission. It is authorization to file and accept grants with and from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs for the parkland acquisition and renovations for communities grant programs for improvements to Lars Anderson Park. Article 6 seeks to formally dedicate 55 acres of Lars Anderson Park as parkland in order to receive up to $400,000 in grant monies for park improvements. The Commonwealth requires the land to be specifically designated as parkland in order to qualify for grant funding. And in addition to making the town eligible to receive grant monies, the article also provides a means for the town to apply for, finance, and execute improvements to Lars Anderson. That money, in other words, would go towards planned improvements to the park. The 55.05 acres the Commission seeks to formally protect excludes approximately 10 acres referred to as the services area, which includes the auto museum, the carriage house, the staging areas used by the town for equipment, and 3 small homes on the property. Approximately 4 acres of the excluded services area falls on the Boston side of the property. So there have been votes by both the advisory committee, only the advisory committee has voted. The selectmen have discussed this but not taken a vote. The advisory committee voted no action by a vote 14 opposed to a favorable vote. So it was 14 opposed, 6 in favor, so that was a vote for no action by the advisory committee. The subcommittee, our subcommittee, had a discussion about the fact that the Isabel Anderson donated the land to the town for the purposes of public recreation, or for charitable purposes, or for purposes of public education in 1951, and the fact that if town meeting votes in favor of Article 6, the vote will become the registered deed to the land, which formally provides those 55.05 acres with Article 97 protections, which means we would eliminate the possibility of the current deeded options. Committee members agreed with the report of the Advisory Capital Subcommittee that the grant funds are not sufficient to justify taking a large publicly owned parcel out of consideration for any other potential use at this time of uncertainty around the town and school's long-term need for capital options. So the recommended vote to all of you is to take a formal position of recommending a vote of no action to town meeting on Article 6. I move that. Second, and questions?
So just to be clear, when we vote this, if we vote yes, we're voting no action.
If you vote yes, you are voting to recommend no action.
Further discussion? All right. We're ready for a roll call vote.
Okay, will you do that, please?
Sure. Ms. Tram?
Yes.
Ms. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Mr. Pollak?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Scotto? Yes. Mr. Lepsky? Yes. Mr. Chang?
Yes.
Dr. Jackson?
Yes.
Okay. We have 7 minutes. How
Thank
many
you.
more are we
7
doing?
minutes, okay. Article 7, submitted by Patricia Connors, town meeting member from Precinct 3, and Cornelia Vanderzeel, town meeting member from Precinct 15, to see if the town will accept the provisions of Section 148C of Chapter 149 of the Massachusetts General Laws, the Earned Sick Time Law pursuant to Article 115 of the amendments to the Constitution of the Commonwealth, or act on anything relative thereto. The article seeks to have the town accept the provisions of this recently passed state law, Section 148C of Chapter 149, as stated, which is known as the Earned Sick Time Law. The law was overwhelmingly endorsed by Brookline voters as part of a November 2014 statewide ballot question. The law as enacted does not cover employees of municipalities unless it is endorsed by the municipality through a vote, which in Brookline would need to be a vote of town meeting. So that is why the warrant article has been brought. Petitioners feel that the new law, and petitioners were, one of the petitioners was at our meeting, feel that the new law offers a significant benefit, especially to part-time workers in the town and schools who are not covered by collective bargaining agreements, and provides significant protections in addition because it includes an appeals process through the Attorney General's office. They also point out the law's allowance for use of accrued sick time for well care visits, those are doctor's appointments for checkups and pharmacy visits and things like that, because these are particularly valuable to workers who have caregiver responsibilities. At the school subcommittee hearing, Petitioner Vanderzeel expressed a particular concern on the school side for our long-term substitutes who are not represented by the BEU. Other committees have acted on this. The Advisory Personnel Subcommittee was unanimous for no action. The Advisory Committee was also 13-1 with 5 abstentions for no action, and the Board of Selectmen was unanimous for no action. This is not because anybody has disagreed with the idea that earned sick leave is an important issue. And in our subcommittee discussion, we talked about, as like the town, the schools appreciate the petitioner's intent in raising these issues, and like the town, our Deputy Superintendent for Administration and Finance and our HR department raised concerns about potential conflicts between the law's specific definitions and provisions of our collective bargaining agreements, which could put us in difficult positions. Ms. Dunn also responded very swiftly to address the accrued sick time for long-term substitutes whose work for many months at a time on a full-time basis when they are here should qualify them for earned sick time, and Ms. Dunn has made it clear that that will become, if it has not already become, it will become the practice of the public schools of Brookline. Our Human Resources Department has prepared a more detailed policy for the school committee to consider that would memorialize that practice for long-term substitutes, and again, like the town, clearly exempt some stipendiary positions, interns, and regular substitute teachers who would otherwise be covered by the law. But if we had to implement the law, that coverage would present really unsupportable administrative challenges to the public schools of Brookline. As Mary Ellen Dunn explained very quickly and very well to the advisory committee when they took this up. So taking into consideration both the potential impact of accepting the law on our collective bargaining agreements and the swift action that's been taken to provide paid sick leave to long-term substitutes and to develop appropriate policies for other part-time positions, we recommend that the school committee, again, with an affirmative vote of no action for the town meeting. So an affirmative vote from the school committee would be for no action at town meeting.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Pollack, any discussion? All right. Oh, yes? Ms. Charlevsky?
Very quickly, I'm really pleased that our HR person could very quickly initiate this process, and I think that it really is very important. So, thank you.
I particularly thank Mary Ellen Dunn and Elaine O'Sullivan for responding so quickly to this obvious inequity that was in our practice and fixing it.
Terrific. Good. Yes, Lisa, we're still here. We're about to vote the no action. Affirmative vote is a vote for no action. Any further discussion? Lisa, do you want to say something?
No, sorry. You guys disappeared for a minute. Sorry.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, we will poll the committee. Ms. Stram?
Yes.
Ms. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Mr. Pollack?
Yes.
I will say yes. Ms. Scotto, Mr.
Yes.
Chesky, Mr.
Yes.
Chang. Dr. Jackson?
Yes.
All right. So we have gotten through 2 of the 4, but we only have 2 minutes left. So I'm suggesting that we're going to suspend both of them? Or no?
No, we only have one more because we are deferring,
we'll do
we are
one more.
deferring Article 16, and in fact, you will all be pleased to hear my report on this. Article 18, submitted by M.K. Marilise, Town Meeting Member 6, and Ruth Ann Snyder, Town Meeting Member also from Precinct 6, resolved that the Town of Brookline is committed to achieving the goal of having all town departments reflect the 23% of Brookline residents who are Black, Latino, Asian, and other regional color, as reported by the Brookline Community Foundation study. There is another resolved clause that I will leave you all to read. The subcommittee discussion was about this article focusing attention on hiring a diverse workforce, something we are all committed to. It originally included language pertaining to the public schools of Brookline hiring practices as well as the town in its resolved clauses. After discussing the separation of the town from the school district in terms of administration and oversight with the petitioners and establishing the town meeting does not have standing to speak to school district hiring practices as it does for the town of Brookline departments, the petitioners agreed to remove references to the public schools of Brookline in this warrant article. We agreed that, separate from this warrant article, the school committee could have a productive conversation with the public and with the petitioners about how the schools currently address hiring and retaining a diverse workforce, and potentially a conversation about whether amendments to our policy manual could contribute to strengthening our practices. As a result, there is no need for the school committee to vote a position on this article.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Any questions? All right. So we finished, I think, 75 seconds early, which is incredibly exciting. We're going to take a couple-minute recess while we redo the chairs. I think we're not adjourned, are we? We're going to stay in session. Okay. So we're going to stay in session, but we're going to take a couple-minute recess while we welcome the Board of Selectmen.
Not here. I don't need it. I don't
That isn't coming. There's two here.
Great, I'll pass some of those out.
I am.
Good time.
Holding those back. Carla and I went out a little bit of wine I love it. I grew up in East Town, so I've got a little
So it's not
to the point that we have to go out to the town.
Is there a way to get it on the big screen? Nobody's gonna, okay, great. Yeah. No one's gonna be able to see it. It'll just take a minute. That's a tough one. Excuse me.
Yeah, it is. It is. Come sit down. Okay. Let's give that a chance. Right. Yeah, that was why we did it that way.
Are you going to mention any of these dates, James?
I think Neil will.
He hasn't?
Okay, well, we're already in session. Do you want to call yourselves into session? Do you want to push your Well, the one thing I will do is welcome the Board of Selectmen. I've been told that the DNA of our boards is different, not least of which because we offer M&Ms and pretzels and cookies to our guests. And one of them is a returning member. Welcome back, Selectman Heller.
So now the Board of Selectmen piece of this is in session, and we're having a joint session of the School Committee and the Board of Selectmen to introduce to the boards and committees, plus the public, the ninth school study that we've commissioned, Civic Moxie. Susan Silberberg is representing Civic Moxie. And she'll be talking to us, presenting in a couple of minutes. Cara Bruton over there has also been working on this project, and she's going to be assisted by Margaret Wood in the helping us with the public outreach as we go forward. So just talking a little about how we got here. Those of you who've been paying attention remember, I'm going to say the word, and hopefully I won't have to say it too much after this, the B-Space process, which came up with the answer expand in place with multiple elements focusing on one, Lawrence School, two, the Devotion School, adding to that project that had already been in the pipeline, a Driscoll renovation and expansion, and coupled with high school expansion. So with respect to Lawrence, that's done. The Devotion piece, 5, I believe, additional classrooms were added to that project from the original scope, and that's approved by the SBA, and that's well in progress, and construction will be starting, what, in the fall? July. Okay. Driscoll was submitted, a statement of interest was submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, who declined participation. And the high school, we've submitted an SOI, a statement of interest, thank you, to the MSBA, and that one is pending now, and we're expecting an answer in another month or two or three. But After B-Space, the enrollment growth has continued. We're faced with the non-participation by the MSBA, and we also had a recommendation from the Override Study Committee that we reopen the process to consider a ninth school as an alternative to expand in place, and that's what we're doing here tonight. And when we decided to do the ninth school study, we decided that we would do it right. And we hired a team of professionals, headed by Susan, to perform a rigorous, data-driven analysis of our options, including those which involve eminent domain. And that's probably the biggest difference in what this study has looked at versus B-Space. So the study in the RFP that Susan was working from examined potential sites for a ninth school and also looked at expansion of existing schools but also including the potential use of eminent domain. The report is going to be released publicly and will be on the town website tomorrow. It's there right now, I'm told. But portions of the report have been redacted at the advice of counsel because we are proposing with some of the sites involve the use of eminent domain, which is a legal process, and we received advice of counsel that releasing what we thought the sites would cost could really jeopardize our negotiating position. So the study did take longer than we originally anticipated because we went into a lot of detail and there was a lot of deeds that needed to be researched and drawings that needed to be done and considered, and it took longer than we thought. I just want to explain a little about eminent domain. Eminent domain is a process where we purchase or we take private land where we would have to pay full market value, but we have a right under certain circumstances to take private land. And it's something you have to think hard and examine. It's not something you do willy-nilly. It needs to be part of an important municipal purpose. And I think a school is an important municipal purpose. So let me just tell you a little about what's going to be happening tonight. So I'm going to be turning the podium over to Susan, who's going to be presenting the report to us. And then we're going to hear from Cara Bruton, who's going to give us a staff analysis of the report. And then I'm going to bring the discussion into the committees, the school committee and the Board of Selectmen for questions, comments. But we're also going to be circulating cards. And Ms. Woods, with the blue, has cards where you can submit questions and comments. And I would hope that at this stage, at this meeting, the questions would be focused mainly on clarifications, things you don't understand, things you might want to know that aren't being said, and not so much I like this or I don't like this. There's going to be opportunities for those kinds of comments at a later stage. And then after the board has its discussion, what we'll also do as the board is discussing, we'll be looking at the cards and we'll see if there are questions we can answer now or comments that are raised that we can raise now. For those that we can answer now, and for those that we can't answer now, we're going to take them back. If they require research, we'll research them, and then we'll be posting questions and answers as this process goes forward on the website, on the town website. So after that's done, the board does its thing. We might have some votes. We might be ready for some votes. And then we're going to have a multi-week, multi-month public process, which I'll describe after after we do.
You want to do it now? Why don't you do it
Yeah,
now?
okay. So let me describe the way we're going to be doing the public process now. So we're going to have two open houses, one in the morning, one in the evening. The first one, I believe, is going to be on the 3rd of November.
That's the evening, yeah.
That's the evening of the 3rd of November. And which I'll note for the Board of Selectmen is a Board of Selectmen night. So that's one that we're not going to be able to be at. And Carol, why don't you, or can you describe how that's going to work?
So I'm Carol Bruton, Economic Development Director for the town. I work in the Planning Department. So there are 3 meetings that we have penciled in that are looking pretty good, and those are also on the town website as of right now. And as we update information, we will on that page. But so we have Tuesday, November 3rd from 6 to 9 p.m. That's going to be at the Denny Room over in the Health Building in the lower level. And the idea is to do an open house style presentation. So rather than tonight, we've got to get through a lot of information. The idea is that we literally have posters. Joe Connolly has agreed to join us, other staff from school, building department, planning, so that if you have a specific question, you can just come ask about that question, whether it's about a specific school or about school districts, whatever that might be. So we're going to do 2 of those open house style. One November 3rd, 6 to 9 p.m. The second one, November 12th in the morning. We're trying to capture the before work, before drop-off crowd. That's 7 to 9 a.m. That's going to be in the 5th floor in this room, school committee room. And then we've got a public hearing scheduled for the evening of Thursday, December 3rd. Time to be announced, place to be announced, and then we'll go from there.
Right. And the hope is after the public hearing, we would then bring the decision back to the school committee and the Board of Selectmen, and that in the December to January timeframe is when we would be making decisions. So that's kind of an overview of the public process. So with that, let me turn this over to, oh yeah, please.
Good, thank you. That was terrific. I agree with all of it. I just want to say it's such an important moment. It's very exciting in a sense because we've been talking about a ninth school for years and years, and it's just very important to acknowledge this moment that I'm just very pleased to be discussing this. I'm incredibly grateful to Kara Bruton in particular, who has borne this on her in her backpack and carried it up the mountain. So thank you, Kara, for all the amazing work that you've done in leading this process. As we've all said for a number of years now, this growth is a great problem. It's great in the sense that we have so many families moving to Brookline for the schools, but it is a problem in the sense that we really do struggle with the balance of how to accommodate that growth. And in the ninth school process, as Neil said, it really has been a data-driven and rigorous, sort of expert-driven process, which is exciting. We've typically done things within a citizen-led way, which is great for transparency, but it's actually very important to also have the expertise from someone like Civic Moxie and all the different resources you brought. So thank you, Susan, for that. And then the other thing is that we have really, in this report, as Neil said, tried to balance transparency and the advice of attorneys on what to disclose. So there were many, many discussions about how much of this could be disclosed, and there were, I won't go back and forth, but there were, can we disclose anything? Should we disclose everything? And where we landed was, our question to the attorney was, we would like to disclose as much as humanly possible that does not compromise our negotiating position. And so what you'll see is probably, 96, 97% of the final, with some things redacted. I'm certain there are going to be people who want that last 3%, but just on the advice of attorneys, we really can't because it does compromise the negotiating position. But it's 96% of what is there, so so I think that's really great. And thank you to everyone, including Town Council's office, Jocelyn Murphy, and the eminent domain expert, John Leonard, who helped us get to a place where we could disclose as much as possible. It also means that there are things in here that are sketches that we're going to all have reactions to, and the public will have reactions to, and so I think it'll be helpful when we get there just to everyone to understand the caveats of what this is and isn't at this conceptual stage. But thank you very much. We're very grateful and excited.
Thank you. Susan, I think you should say a little something about any redistricting that you see is hypothetical.
There are so many caveats on the redistricting maps, and I will probably jump in there if Rebecca Stone does not beat me to it, just to say that the redistricting maps, everyone's going to anchor on them. They are completely hypothetical. There is a whole separate public process that has to go on about redistricting, public meetings, it's a whole process, and Rebecca can describe it if people want, but these are truly hypothetical redistricting maps.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go for it. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? I have a cold, so bear with me on that. It's a little strange because I want to talk to you and I want to talk to you, and there's a screen there and over there, so I'm going to be floating a little bit in terms of looking. I'm really pleased to be here. This study has been kind of a tough work for many of us, and it's been a joy to work with staff and Board of Selectmen and School Committee over these past months, kind of smart, dedicated people. So I'm pleased that this is finally going public and we can get into a discussion about what the study says. I would say, just to start, that the goals for this meeting are to introduce this site study to the public, to review what our charge was so you understand what we were asked to do and understand our process and the results that came about, and then to overview the 6 finalist sites and to answer questions. And I'm sure you're all pleased to know that those 6 finalist sites are not in the 3% we're not releasing tonight, but you'll get to hear what those finalist sites are. And, success tonight really is if you understand the approach of the study, and if you understand how we got in some broad way to the 6 finalist sites, and then understanding how we're setting up for next steps, and everyone's clear on the process. I'm Susan Silberberg. I'm principal of Civic Moxie, which is a local urban design and city planning firm. I teach at MIT part-time and lead the firm. Urban Focus and New Atlantic Development are also on our consulting team. And New Atlantic Development is a local developer, Peter Roth. He actually did Olmsted Hill development here in Brookline, very knowledgeable about local construction practices, the kinds of things we needed. And Urban Focus is a real estate development advisory firm. Do a lot of work in my firm with Sandy Stroud, the principal of that firm, giving expertise so that we understood that what we're proposing could actually be built, and realistic kind of order of magnitude costs within that, really trying to be as specific as possible to answer everyone's questions. We bring land planning, real estate development, urban design, and architecture to the team. So I'm going to talk about the enrollment trends and what's been done to date, talk a little bit about how we got 6 sites from the 26 locations we originally identified, what our charge was, our approach, and the criteria that we used to select sites. We're going to talk about student school assignment models and how we looked at those redistricting areas, and then how we used initial target areas that were set to really hone in on where we were going to look in the town. And then we thought a little bit beyond the traditional school model that was given to us as the charge, and why. And then we're just going to go through the first cut. 26 locations, we got 6 finalists, why those? And then I'm going to walk you through those 6 finalists, look at conceptual site plans, look at redistricting maps, and how we got to be and what some of the issues are for each of them, and then we'll take questions, and then Cara will take it from there. So we've already heard about enrollment trends, and I hope everyone can see this slide, that 2005 we started with 1 enrollment, and then there was an addition of 1,487 students and 56 sections. within the 10 years. So at present, we've grown quite a bit. 5375 in terms of enrollment, and there are 257 K through 8 sections within the school. And I'll say that sections really means a homeroom, classroom within the study. How that challenge has been met to date has been, adroitly and very kind of carefully thought out and meeting it as it comes. But a number of things have been happening in order to meet that enrollment challenge, which means that some parents might not even see where the pressures are. But all the custodial and building trades within the schools have been moved out. They moved to Lars Anderson Park and the 2 sheds that are by the skating rink and by the auto museum. 11 of the pre-K, the BEEP classrooms, have been moved to private rentals and of office space that's been rented within the town. And then administration functions have also moved to other sites. And that has made way for some of those additional sections and those children to where we are at the present, which means that there is no more room for expansion within the schools using these methods to accommodate the growth in enrollment. So what that means, in looking forward, we've talked about 2005, 2015. Now we're looking at a projected enrollment of adding an additional 539 children, 32 K through 8 sections in the coming years to 2021, the future. And that includes 27 sections that would be in a new school. So that would be K through 8, three classrooms, 3 sections per grade, and 5 net new from the devotion school renovation. That project is going on. And that is projected to 2021. I'm going to go back. I feel like there should be a drum roll or something along this. I'd like to get the 6 sites out there, so that's kind of on the table, and then I'll talk about all of the other things. We went from 26 to 6 locations, and the 6 locations are the Cottage Farm School, which is on private land adjacent to Amory Woods and to Amory Park, on the Mass Association for the Blind parking lot, and on land that is owned by the BU residential properties. The Harvard Street School is on Harvard Street on one site, which is the TJ Maxx site, which houses TJ Maxx and the bank building. The Center Street School is on the 2 town-owned parking lots in Coolidge Corner on Center Street. The Village School is on a number of sites, but the main ones being the Stop and Shop site in between Brookline Village and Coolidge Corner, and small portion, the parking lot next to it, which is part of the Stop and Shop, and then tiny portions, we're talking 3,000 or 4,000 square feet from the Walgreens site to make way for an access road, and to the condos, the backyard of the condos on St. Paul Street to accommodate that. The Walnut Street School is on the site of the former Lincoln School and also includes the U-Haul site along Route 9, those 2 parcels. And the last one is the Isabel School, because we think since Isabel donated the land, she gets some due in having something named after her. But that's at Lars Anderson Park, not within the park area, but is actually located within the area used right now for the maintenance sheds, the DPW, the building department, and parking, which is kind of behind, on Avon Street, behind the skating rink and the auto museum. And that's all on Brookline property within Lars Anderson. So those are the 6 sites that we investigated. What we were charged to do was we were asked to use town-generated selection criteria and focus on private property. So as Neil Wyszynski said, there is the possibility of eminent domain here. But also looking at both public and private together, really trying to take a comprehensive look. and identifying and analyzing sites for a new K through 8 school that would be a traditional neighborhood school in the model of what Brookline residents understand today. And that to organize the information for clear understanding and sound decision-making by the school committee and by the Board of Selectmen. How we approached the work was really iterative, but it followed this basic path of we reviewed and refined the town school program and site criteria. We researched case studies for both traditional schools and concept schools, which I will talk about in a minute. We conducted a broad search of property throughout the town, both by viewing Google Maps and Google Earth, looking at the town assessor's maps and other maps, town-owned land, and driving through town. And then we reviewed data on those sites, ownership records, deed restrictions, prepared a map of possible sites, then created a matrix and applied the criteria. And then we tested the sites using town-generated student school assignment GIS models to see how they worked within districting models and do they meet the neighborhood school criteria. And that allowed us to narrow that initial list of 26 locations to 6 locations with input from the town staff and the board chairs. When we got to that point, we developed schematic site layouts to test the suitability of those sites, and I want to emphasize these are not architecturally designed sites, so we know that the program will work on the site, but they obviously need the love and care of kind of a deep dive in terms of how they really fit within context. So please take them as they are, as schematic layouts. And then we prepared conceptual level development cost estimates using current data around school building costs and other factors to get some order of magnitude and comparison between the projects. So the criteria, what did we use? We had basically 4 buckets of criteria that we looked at. And the first one was around access and location around the traditional neighborhood school. Ideally, it would minimize walking distances for school children, good pedestrian and bike access, good vehicular access, so enough room for vehicles to get in and out for drop-offs. Proximity to public transportation would be a plus, and central to school density, the student density and growth, which I'll talk about in a minute. The site characteristics are another category we looked at, which is we were asked to look at a site or combined site size from a few parcels assembled that would be 3 to 3.5 acres. Also told, 3 could be on the lower end if we could find adjacent playgrounds off-site that could be used, and maybe up to 6, depending on the site. We looked at topography. Was it appropriate for a school site? Did it work for playgrounds? Any environmental issues around wetlands? Could it accommodate playing fields? Or were they adjacent? And we also looked at things such as if there were existing buildings on the site, could they be reused for some purpose? And was the shape of the parcel conducive to a school? And then we did a standard parking across the sites in conjunction with working with the school staff that said that about 60% of staff for parking would be about right, which comes out to about 60 spaces for a school, given there is an average of about 100 staff in the K through 8 elementary schools. And we also looked at legal and regulatory issues. So were there deed restrictions that would prohibit certain uses? Open space that was protected by Article 97 for exclusive use in that way had other challenges, kind of political and just replacement challenges around open space if we were to use it. Would we have to relocate existing uses? If we did take land by eminent domain, you have to relocate residential, office, all of those in addition to paying for property. Was it a historic district, either local or national? Historic buildings and conservation land. And ownership, we clearly were looking at, was this one parcel under one owner? Was it multiple owners? Politically sensitive is probably no surprise to you. Every parcel in Brookline is politically sensitive. So that's a check mark across. I think we actually took it off the criteria list because we know it's politically sensitive. That's why this is so challenging. Potential property swaps, perhaps. We tried to get creative Could the town swap property instead of purchasing? And then could we integrate complementary uses? Or if the town needed other uses, was there a way to bundle them? So we were really trying to be as creative as possible to come up with what this would be. To talk a little bit about the student school assignment models, the redistricting, it's important to keep in mind that any construction or creation of a 9th elementary school is going to require changes to the student school assignments, so no matter where it is. It's also important to understand that those changes will affect those with children not yet in the system through 2nd grade as of 2015. But older students than that most likely will be in the high school or beyond, and you'll be through with all of the college, pain about applying by 2021. And so it's important to put that into context. I'd also like to point out that even if a 9th school is not built, there's still going to be redistricting, because as the enrollment grows, they're shifting around of where that can fit. So it's not an issue that's only relevant to this study. So I'd like to show the current school district map, and I really want to acknowledge all the work that Kara Bruton did on these redistricting models, which were very labor intensive and took a lot of time and thought. The current school district map, first you should know that today 40% of the school enrollment in Brookline lives within a quarter mile, what we consider to be walkable distance to the school that they attend. So that's a figure that you should know. And what you see here are the district outlines on the map. They're not actually the district outlines. They are the outlines of the enrollment area of where children come for the school. So this is actually, Kara modeled this based on actual addresses and school assignments. And the circles around the existing schools show the quarter mile walkable radius. So you get some sense about where children are actually going to school, the catchment area, if you will, and then you get a sense for each school where the walkable part of that catchment area is. And that's the current day status. When we talk about initial target area, what we did even before staff worked on that map was looking at where the areas we really should be targeting, where the school, a new school should be. And that criteria was based on staff really looking at that walkable area and trying to understand where would a new school fit that was more than a quarter of a mile away from other schools, that would allow a catchment area for a new neighborhood school. And then also understanding where was the most density of students and kind of potential growth around new development projects that are in the pipeline within the town. And what resulted was this map where the beige area, which is mostly North Brookline, I'm going to go back for 1 minute because this is an important point. If you notice Heath School, it's a very large catchment area, and it's not because that's the largest school in the district, but it's because it's an area that has very few children. They don't live on the golf courses, and that whole area within the town south of Heath School. So that's a very large catchment area. So it's actually not surprising when the town did a map of looking at where are the likely target areas for a new school, that it's not only North Brookline, but it actually kind of comes down along the east as well, because of that whole issue of no students there, kind of in South Brookline for that wide swath across the town. And so we came up with this. This is the map that we started with that showed where we were going to try to target, but we did look everywhere because we felt it was important to try to get a picture and to be able to say to people, yes, we looked at all of the possibilities. And within that, there were two target areas that really stood out because of their location relative to other schools and because of where the density of students were. And one of them is up around the Cottage Farm area. You can see at the top of the map. And then the other one is really kind of from Coolidge Corner to Brookline Village, centered around the Stop and Shop area on Harvard Street, where the two considered to be kind of target areas within the larger school area. Just to point out the challenge in this, our original charge was 3.5 acres for a site. What we have here is a kind of random area of Brookline. It shows the high school and then over to where we are here tonight. And we've done a 3.5-acre grid. So the white grid on that map is showing what a 3.5-acre parcel looks like overlaid on the town. And many of those sites, as you can see, they're multiple houses. Probably they're multifamily, they're condos within a 3-acre grid. So we're looking at a complex problem of where do you find those 3.5 acres. At the bottom, what we've done, there's the 3.5-acre square box on the left, and then we've just done 2 schools to give you an idea about existing schools. The middle graphic shows Lincoln School with the recreation fields, and then the right-hand one is Pierce without the fields across the street from it, to give you some idea about what the existing school sites look like. So, excuse me. So that challenge made us kind of push beyond the box a little bit and say, well, what if we searched beyond a traditional school model? What if we looked at other options to try to kind of widen what some of the possibilities might be in town? And so we thought about this in terms of 3 typologies. We thought about it as a traditional neighborhood school, the charge we were given. And then we thought about what if we looked at a mixed-use model school or a concept or theme-based school? And how might that change, what we looked at? Could it open up possibilities? And the mixed-use school is a trend in certain parts of the country, and the idea is it's a school in other uses. It might be retail, it could be commercial, it could be shared facilities, and sometimes ground floor retail. And it can often be on a smaller site footprint with shared program areas, which can make it very efficient. And it can share recreational facilities with nearby parks or public areas. And the concept or theme-based school could be STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, or add art to that for STEAM, or some other curriculum focus, or different classroom or learning experiences for that. So we looked at how that might kind of broaden the mix a bit. The mixed-use case studies are in the report, as well as the concept school in the appendix. But one good example is Teachers Village, and you never hear Newark, New Jersey touted for anything, but in fact it's actually the hot place right now in terms of education and innovation. And Teachers Village is a mixed-use development. It's got 2 charter schools, it's got a total of 1,000 students, a ground floor retail. There are also housing for teachers and kind of other things, the arts within that village. And it's been extraordinarily successful, there's tax credits, there's lots of investment from private companies, including I think Goldman Sachs, into that model. So that was something we looked at. What do those look like? And then the concept and theme-based school study, Baltimore Design School is a good example. This is an existing building, but could just as easily be a new building. This won major awards, excellent design firm, Ziegler Sneed in Baltimore. But an adaptive reuse housed in an abandoned factory that has this collaborative and progressive educational environment that also shares with community uses. So the community comes in and uses it. So kind of a wonderful way to share. So there are others in. This is just a sample of some of the things that we looked at within the study. And we thought, okay, if we're going to do this, would that change our site criteria? Because that would be important to know. Would it really kind of shake things up? And in fact, it doesn't change much. We're pretty confident that the 26 sites we looked at would be the same. And in fact, most of the sites that are on the finalist list also work for most of them, not some more than others, but that they work for a concept or the theme-based school. What doesn't necessarily work is minimizing walking distances, because it's not a neighborhood school, and in fact you want it to be central to the whole town as opposed central to one area of the town. And so that's a criteria that would change in site selection. And we wouldn't need such a large site anymore perhaps, because people would be open to a different kind of model. And perhaps playing fields wouldn't be necessary either. Many of these schools have playing fields on their roofs and other models. And so, but most of the other criteria still hold true. And certainly the kind of, I think, commitment to excellence of design and innovation and curriculum are there as well. So the first cut, I'm not going to go into this in detail, and this is hard to read for all of you, but we had 26 locations. And many of those locations had more than one site. So we looked at a location and then we tried to identify all of the parcels in that location that might be appropriate to use for site assembly if we needed it. And they were really spread. We looked throughout the town, even beyond the target areas. And they ranged from up on Commonwealth Avenue, looking at some of the BU properties and privately owned properties, to some of the open space in the town, to privately owned parcels and things that we thought might be coming up for sale or could be, open to purchase. And that came up with 26 locations. You can see all of them in the appendix of the report, along with our criteria charts going through with information on each of them, including the assessed value. And to get from those 26 to 6, we applied the criteria. And some of the thought process, just to kind of try to condense it for you about what we did, we asked the following questions. Out of all of these sites, are most of the criteria met for any given site? And if not, are other criteria met in a way that justifies choosing a less desirable location? So if some site had just some overwhelmingly good things that kind of rang about it, could you manage with some other things that weren't as good? And that kind of allowed us to filter through a few. We also, publicly owned land, if it was near a desirable privately owned parcel, what would outweigh us using the publicly owned land as opposed to the privately owned land? So thinking that publicly owned land, the town already owns it, it would be prudent to try to use that when possible and forego on the private purchase. So that kind of settled out some locations. Is town open space with Article 97 restrictions the only option in a particular area of town, or do we have other locations that would be more suitable so that we weren't necessarily addressing the challenges, the regulatory and the political challenges of pulling open space kind of off the table for use and trying to replace it somewhere? And we also had a question, is the site simply too inaccessible to be practical? And at what point does that weigh against other criteria? So we tended to look in groupings. We looked in North Brookline, Coolidge Corner, North Harvard Street, and then the Brookline Village and nearby, and kind of applied these criteria according to those groupings throughout the town to try to come up with a range of sites that were appropriate. And that got us down to these 6 sites. Within those locations, we tried to select the best parcels that minimize the need to displace anyone if the town was using eminent domain, really tried to minimize negative impact on the community and try to maximize positive impacts on the community. We did the conceptual site layouts, development cost estimates, the modeling, and then we really listed challenges and opportunities for each site. What that included, we're not going to talk about cost tonight for reasons that were discussed earlier, but I would like to tell you what we included because we tried to be as realistic as possible, but also understanding, and this is difficult, that costs that we do today are going to be different in 6 weeks from now. But that order of magnitude that enabled us to compare across the sites, because we use the same methodology to price all of the construction costs. And we included everything that a development project would include. These were development spreadsheets, pro forma, looking at all of the costs that might be built into the project, the contingencies, insurance, general conditions by a contractor, to come up with as an accurate snapshot as possible. We also, Kara Bruton and the town did the student school assignment GIS models for both and looked at the big picture and some assumptions for those models I'm going to go through quickly. We assumed no additional building capacity other than the 9th school at 550 children. It did include growth assumptions from new developments permitted or in process, including Hancock Village. All students within a quarter mile of a school, including the new proposed 9th Elementary, whatever site it was, were assigned to that school. Schools were then assigned the closest students to them proportionally up to the capacity of the school. And in some cases, the assignments of the model students were balanced in order to take into account significant geographic features, ridge lines, hills, things that made it impractical for walking, as well as a kind of equal distribution of out-of-district students as well as free lunch students to get, a proportional mix. This is the student school assignment. This is the current situation, where the black lines show the catchment area, again, for each current school. And the color area shows actually what the school district zone is, with the white areas being the buffer zones. So you can see what is on the map. If you go to the town website and look at the school buffer zones, you can see what each school assignment area is. And then you can see that match to where students actually go in terms of the larger catchment area in the black line. So I'd like to walk you through the 6 sites to give you a sense about what they are in the details. We're going to start with the Cottage Farm School. I'm going to start in North Brookline and work south. The Cottage Farm School looks at the area adjacent to Amory Woods and looks at privately owned land. We started looking with a larger group of parcels and narrowed it down to smaller parcels. And what we have here is there's Amory Park and Amory Woods, which is conservation land, and then we're proposing using the vacant land, the backyard of a BU-owned property, a house, and another BU-owned property, as well as the parking lot of Mass Association for the Blind, in order to construct the school, and it would face on Mason Square. That's right. Is that, no, not Mason Square. No, Knivett's behind it, and yeah, it is Mason Square. Mason Square, so it can face in both directions. So we have the school, and again, these are schematic, this sits within the neighborhood of Cottage Farm, and we think it could work quite well within that context if designed in an appropriate way with the residential community. This school program would use the adjacent Amory Park and playing fields as a recreation area, but we've left room for a playground for younger grades. There's room for kindergarten through 2nd grade to be closer on site. This is the kind of parcel assessment we did. The left-hand side shows the parcels we originally looked at. On the right, you can see what we're actually using. So we're using parts of the open space on the parcels and not touching the buildings within that. To give you an idea, and the bottom grid, and all of this is in the report, shows the ownership, the size, and the assessed value for all of those parcels. So we're using one Mass Association of the Blind parcel that is now parking lot, and then 2 for BU-owned property. This is what the student school assignment map looks like. So for all of these, the black line shows the existing catchment area of students for a school, existing as of 2015, just as in the other maps I showed you earlier. And then the colors show you the school assignment with the Cottage Farm School in. And in each of these, the ninth school is the purple, the kind of darker purple color. So you can see how the school assignments kind of shift. But I think that's all I'm going to say about this for now, because I want to get through these for questions. They're all in the report. Just a summary, this is a 2-story, 100,000 square foot school. They're all 100,000 square feet. This would be 2 stories. There's no acquisition of private buildings needed, only land. We have 49,000 square feet of surface parking. We've tried to meet zoning wherever possible. It hasn't always been possible. It's listed in the report where we haven't done that. And this is a traditional school model. And there's no through access to Amory Woods for a school to use the playing fields, so the students would have to walk along the sidewalk. They wouldn't cut through Amory Woods, it's conservation land. This is subject to local historic district oversight, and traffic patterning would have to be addressed in terms of Amory Street for pickup, drop-off, and that's true for most of these sites. The next one is a Center Street School. So this one is in Coolidge Corner, utilizing the two town-owned parking lots. And what we have is the school resting on the parking lot behind the buildings on Harvard Street, behind the theater, the Gap, and CVS, utilizing that parking lot. There would be parking underneath the building, replacement parking, and then a parking garage across the street on Center Street South parking area. So this is, it's building up Coolidge Corner and replacing that parking lot. Still the same amount of public parking. We've replaced all the public parking on site plus staff parking as well within that. We're using two public properties, so there's no land purchase involved here. There's no land cost. And this is what the redistricting map, the Center Street, and I really do want to emphasize that no matter where the school is, that student school assignment will go through the same process as would happen with any decision about buffer zones. Public hearings, discussion about that. This is what that map looks like with the Center Street School. It's 3 stories, 100,000 square feet. There's a parking structure with parking, 179 replacement spaces total. Harvard Street retail would remain, so we're not touching that, no land acquisition. I'm going to move on with that. This one would have no traditional playgrounds, so there would be playgrounds on the roof on this model. The Village School is on the Stop and Shop site and some adjacent parcels on Harvard Street. What this would entail is this is a mixed-use concept, and so the Stop and Shop, this would necessitate a partnership with the owners of Stop and Shop and a rebuild of the Stop and Shop grocery store on this site. So we're proposing mixed use. The school would be in the front of the site, and Stop and Shop would be below it, and then a parking garage in the rear of the site. What we're proposing is a Stop and Shop parcel and the adjacent parking, and then utilizing a piece of, it's a complex arrangement, but utilizing part of the condo rear yard on St. Paul Street and a tiny sliver of Walgreens for an access roadway. So coming in, just to go back, coming in and access is off in a kind of drop-off circle, kind of in the complex itself. And Scrub-a-Dub would be used as a temporary staging area for parking, and so this would be a phased approach, where a Stop and Shop, there'd be 3 phases of construction to allow Stop and Shop to remain open until it could be rebuilt in front and then converting to the parking garage behind. This is what the redistricting, the model looks like for student school assignment for that scheme. There are 289 parking spaces on this scheme to replace, they would have to replace the Stop and Shop parking. The existing grocery store would remain in Phase 1 and would be moved into the new ground floor retail space during Phase 2, where the parking deck would be built behind. And Scrub-a-Dub land would be used for temporary parking in the adjacent parking while that was going on, so that the store could remain in operation. This is complex phasing. I see all of you kind of going, are you crazy? But in fact, what we were really trying to do was to make sure that if someone said, did you really look at all the possibilities, that we could say, we looked at all of the possibilities and these are all doable. And they really offer a chance for discussion about what the town really wants. The Walnut Street School is next. It's the former Lincoln School on Route 9, as well as the U-Haul site there for those two. And what we would be doing is, full renovation of the school and an addition on that property with a link between and green space, and utilizing the Boylston Street Playground for recreation. Probably a bridge over Route 9 in terms of that would be up for discussion. We put it into our price schemes. So this is town-owned land with one parcel. The U-Haul parcel would be purchased. And this is what the Walnut Street School student school assignment map looks like. And I will say, all of these schemes are very similar in that they all have about the same proportion, and all of them except one, I think, exceed the percentage of students who go to the school, you know, or that are in the quarter-mile walking radius. So they all keep that or exceed it from what is currently in existence. So the existing school would remain full renovation, a new two-story, about 45,000 square foot building. There'd be some surface parking and new green space. There's ledge on that site, so it would have to be blasted, but the town owns the major portion of this scheme, so that helps compensate for that. And again, the bridge across Route 9. The Harvard Street School is on the TJ Maxx site, which also houses the bank on Harvard Street. And this scheme would have ground floor retail, and possibly the bank would be relocated there, and we are not touching the existing TJ Maxx. So the idea is to leave TJ Maxx. Relocating that somewhere would be difficult, but we're using the rest of the parking lot and then incorporating the bank and ground floor retail. The school would be above, and parking would be below grade in this scheme. So a more compact model, again, playgrounds on the roof on this scheme, similar to Center Street, and to the Stop and Shop, and to the village school. This is the site we're using, one ownership. And this is what the student school assignment model looks like for that scheme. So most of these, we're replacing the parking for TJ Maxx, so it's all together underneath the school, including the 60 spaces for the school, and we're relocating retail within the project. This is another complex project, a mixed-use project, complicated phasing, not undoable by any means, but more complex than the others. And then the last of the 6 sites is the Isabel School, which is utilizing the existing parking lot area and maintenance shed and Department of Building sheds on the Lars Anderson site. And what we proposed is tucking the school down really behind, closer to Avon Street. It has to be on Brookline-owned property. And so it's right at the Brookline-Boston border. You can see the line cutting through. I don't know how many of you know, but a portion of Lars Anderson is actually in the city of Boston, even though Brookline owns it. So the school is tucked in there, and the real goal here was not to intrude upon the rest of the park, but to reutilize this space. We're relocating the DPW shed on the site, and then the building department uses, about 10,000 square foot, would be off-site on this scheme. And I will just say that there are opportunities here, we feel, kind of looking in a broader way of what kind of campus-like complex could this be on the site. But we've looked at the school only on itself, and we've stayed within the area that is outside of the restricted area that has been proposed for just open space on the site. So we've really tried to kind of tuck this in. So that's the area we're looking at. And this is what the students' school assignment map looks like. Because of where it's located, there isn't a huge change in how many students would be walking. It actually, I think, probably increases a little bit who can walk within a quarter-mile radius, or certainly within a half-a-mile radius, because of where the school is located. So it's a little counterintuitive, but it actually works quite well with the student school assignment model. Not sure what to tell you. The school's on the Brookline property. I think I've pretty much mentioned everything here. I would like to say that all of these schemes, while we're not talking about costs tonight, they're all similar. in some ways, not the same, though. Not the same by far. The next steps, the Board of Selectmen and School Committee really need to choose the preferred option and define next steps by January of 2016, and then commence a due diligence and potentially kind of go through a state funding process in 2016. The earliest town meeting actions would be spring of 2017, and then the earliest possible school opening would be 2020. So that's where we are.
And before we get to that, to the process, to the points on Susan's slide, there's going to be some public process between now and January that we had mentioned earlier and we'll be highlighting at the end. By the way, if anyone has any questions they'd like to, or comments they'd like to submit to us, just raise your hand and Margaret will collect them. So Kara Bruton now is going to be giving us some staff analysis of the sites. What was just presented was kind of an overview, and now we're going to be the first shot at applying the criteria to start the discussion of perhaps getting us down below 6.
Okay, so again, my name's Kara Bruton. I'm the town's economic development director, work in the planning department. My background is civil engineering and urban planning, and I was asked to work with the school department on this ninth school study. In speaking with school staff, building staff, as well as to a lesser extent, but also keeping them in the loop, parks and preservation, we wanted to share with the board some, out of all these criteria and all these sites and all the pros and cons, we wanted to just kind of highlight some thoughts that might make a difference between looking at these 6 sites. So criteria that we talked a lot about, Joe Connolly and Mary Ellen and I, and even the previous school administration, was sites that were adjacent to playgrounds, especially playing fields, seemed to make more sense or kind of bubble up to the top. Avoiding relocation of uses if at all possible, especially residential uses. That's something that we as staff did not think the town had an appetite to, take on, but we could be wrong. Thirdly, that to look at locations that produce the greatest percentage of walkable homes, so getting that walkability number at least the same, if not up a little bit. And then if the school committee does think about concept schools, in the future, then in that case we would want to look at a more centralized location. So I'm going to be kind of jumping right in and telling you from a staff recommendation how we think 2 of the 6 sites are best suited for the 9th elementary school. And this is mostly by process of elimination. None of these sites, as you guys saw, none of these sites are easy. None of these sites are awesome. All of them have cons. But I do think there's a couple of sites that I'm going to be recommending to the boards that we take off the table for reasons I'll get into. So at the bottom of the list, one thing we talked a lot about, again, at a staff level, was complex operations and site acquisition and development. So with the Harvard Street School and the Village School, also known as the TJ Maxx School and the Stop and Shop School, those would, as Susan went through and is very carefully documented in the report, there are very good models across the country of having mixed-use properties, of having, those would require third-party developers to develop a mixed-use building and then kind of sell the school back to the town. Never mind site acquisition. If we're taking these properties in anything but a friendly manner, we would need to relocate any tenants, whether they're residential or commercial. We would need to think about relocating those uses to places that are comparable to what they have now. They're also producing tax dollars right now, and maybe could be producing more tax dollars in the future if it made sense to the community. But the bottom line is, put all that aside. Pretend like all of that's fine, and we don't, that's no problem. The day-to-day operations. So there's, the Pumpkin Fest that just happened at Lincoln, and there's the car wash that competes with the Coolidge Corner Arts Festival every year in Coolidge Corner. There's the day in, day out operations of how a school is run. And imagining that happening, even any lawyer, I'm not sure we could get an agreement that works through all those issues of, 18-wheelers coming in while the school kids are taking a nap, and I don't know. It is done in other communities. Susan's given examples, but we as staff are recommending that those two come off the table because they're just a little bit too aggressive, we believe, for where Brookline is at. In the middle of the list, I've got the Center Street parking lot there. It's very close to Devotion School. It's even in the map, in the concept plan, and when you see it, we have not done traffic studies or any kind of traffic analysis for any of these 6 sites, which we would need to do moving forward. But clearly, Center Street and the heart of the Coolidge Corner district area has a lot of issues with site circulation in and out already, especially during the Devotion peak hours, which is about to expand. And imagine another school where at the same time of day, there's cars moving in and out of that area. So we wanted to highlight that. Secondly, like the 2 retail properties we just talked about, there is not an immediately adjacent play area or playing fields, and the play space would really need to be on the rooftop in order to make that site work. Third, we've talked about how it's in the center of the commercial district, which means during construction we would need to be figuring out how to provide replacement public parking while the school and the parking garage are being constructed. And then finally, the kind of long-term impacts of what that might be on the Coolidge Corner businesses, farmers market, et cetera. Also in the middle of the list is the Old Lincoln School. I should have put the Walnut School, sorry. So the middle of the list is the Walnut School. The big reason, as we've been talking about past practices, past uses of Old Lincoln and uses that we know are going to happen of this space in the near future. It's a swing space for the town, not just for the school, but for town buildings. We have many buildings throughout town. They will continue to need to be renovated and fixed over a long period of time. To give you a sense, the Devotion, as you know, Devotion is using that in fiscal year 16, 17, and 18. We have Driscoll or the high school might be using that in part coming up in 2019, although we are looking at leasing yet another private property. Even if that happens, we would need the Old Lincoln School for the high school. If Old Lincoln were permanently used as a school or for any other use, and we needed about the same amount of space in any year, swing space, Peter Rowe was estimating that would cost us, this was about a year ago now, that would cost us about $560,000 a year on top of any renovation costs like we've been doing at the private spaces. Every time you lease a new space, you have to renovate it, and that's all sunk cost that's gone. So that's kind of a value to the swing space that we have today. Looking back the last 20 years, this is a little bit of color coding, but the green rows and green squares at the bottom over the last 20 years are school uses that have used Old Lincoln. So there was the Heath School renovations, the high school renovations, Baker and Lawrence, most recently Runkle. Interspersed between there, the police department cycled through Old Lincoln, the health department, town hall did for a couple years. And then we did have a couple of narrow windows of gap years where we did lease out Old Lincoln to New England Institute of Art, and then had the ART production of Sleep No More back in 2009. So there's only a couple years you see there on the blank without a letter on the bottom in the last 20 years when we haven't needed Old Lincoln as swing space. So now let's look in the future. The building facilities and school department believe that every 20 or 30 years, somewhere in there, depending on what's going on, each school and town facility needs to be renovated for something. So if you start doing the math, we've got 8 elementary schools. Each one takes 2 or 3 years each. We've got a high school that's estimated to take 3 or 4 years, depending on how we phase construction or phase renovations. Baldwin, Sewell, Lynch, maybe that could all be done in the same year. Town buildings, town hall, DPW, the community building, the health building, recreation buildings. So if we were to kind of play this out over the next 30 years, again, we don't know what the problems are going to be, but we know that we've had them in the last 20 years, and we know what a normal maintenance cycle is in the next 30. So that leaves the top of the list, which is certainly still not easy. We as staff are recommending to the boards that we look more seriously at the Cottage Farm School concept and the Isabel School concept. And the highlighted pros and cons we wanted to bring to your attention. For Cottage Farm School, the pro is that it's, out of all of the concepts, increases the most households that would be in walking distance from current conditions, which aligns with Brookline's neighborhood school concept. Also, having the adjacent Amory for larger play area seems to be a very big pro for this site. And the con is that it's in a local historic district, and this is something that is not just swept away by claiming Dover or some zoning special permit. It's a whole separate general bylaw. It is a serious process. It's going to be very hard to do anything in a local historic district. It doesn't mean it can't be done, but it will require additional public process, negotiation, and support to proceed. The Isabel School, the biggest pro for us as staff, again, is that, as you saw in some of those modeling of potential redistricting student assignment areas, is that it seems to be the least disruptive for especially the northern part of Brookline. And it does help with the growth that we are expecting at Hancock Village. On the other hand, the school where we've kind of tucked it in is just outside that quarter-mile radius of, say, like Buttonwood Village. It's, but it's about a third of a mile away. So you can imagine some kids walking, but it's not the most walkable out of all the scenarios. So another con that we've heard from individual school committee members and from school staff is that we might want to think about keeping that parcel on the table until we figure out what we're doing with the high school expansion and renovation, or even other municipal uses and their needs. And then finally, you all need to understand that we're showing a cartoon of moving DPW off into Boston, which is not fully resolved, but we're showing a space for them. In addition, the building services, we're kicking off site completely, which does need to be done eventually, but we have not identified a site of where those building facilities would go. So that's where we're at with pros and cons.
Okay. So, I guess we'll bring it into the board, and you guys have been collecting cards.
So, why don't we start with Q&A from the board, and then, okay.
But just so
I'd
you
like
know,
to
so we've got 7 or 8 really
Why don't
good
you-
questions. So I'm going to give them to Susan to field. I sort of put them in an order to make
Okay,
sense.
well, we'll start talking.
We'll start with the
The board
board.
should start first.
Right.
So, I guess my first question is, if we don't do a 9th school, what's the alternative?
Well, if I could, that's you, Jim.
Yeah.
Sure. I think the option to building a nice school is what we've been doing now for several years, and that's building in place. We have split classrooms in the existing buildings to create 2 classrooms from 1. We've added small additions on school property. We've looked at modulars, some rental space. Unfortunately, we've maxed out that option in the last few years. And certainly, building in place would not meet the needs of a 27-room school. And so the bottom line would be 4 or 5 years from now, you may find 8 or 9 classrooms built in place, but you eventually would end up increasing enrollment to meet your space needs.
Increasing class size.
I'm sorry, class size. For example, this current year, we have approximately 5,400 students in 255 classrooms plus 5 rental spaces. We have 2 modules, and we have 3 rental spaces at the Pierce School. So we have 260 classrooms for 5,400 students. So the average class size, system-wide K-8, is about 21 plus. That doesn't mean you can mathematically achieve that in every case. So that class size average this year of 21 system-wide has a range from, I think, 18 to 27. I would speculate 5-6 years from now, with our increased enrollment pushing 6,000, the average class size might jump to 23, 24, and now your range might be 25 to 30, well, maybe even higher. So clearly, class size, or the number of students in each classroom would be impacted if we can't find a solution to the need for 27 classrooms.
The concern about class size is a significant one, and one that the school committee's been long attending to, and it's kind of a core value. But what concerns me more about not building a new school is that what comes with the 27 classrooms of the new school are the common facilities that support 27 classrooms. The offices, the library, the cafeteria, the gymnasium, all of those common facilities for 550 students. If instead those 550 students are added into our existing schools, we need to build that capacity of common areas for those 550 students, and we need to do it all the way across town. And because we already have 2 schools that have cafeterias that are so challenged that they have 5 consecutive lunch periods beginning shortly after 10 in the morning, and you can't do 6 and 7 and having kids have their breakfast at the same time they're having their lunch. So what concerns me, and I don't think we've seen the financial projections of this cost, but it's not simply having 27 or 28 or 30 kids in a classroom, because you can hire a second teacher into that classroom if the classroom is physically big enough, but that the cost of adding on to 5 cafeterias and tearing down and rebuilding 5 gyms, or adding second gyms at schools, and all of these additional common facilities we would get less desirable educational outcomes at a considerably higher financial cost to the town with that direction. So that to me, that's the big concern about what would happen if we didn't build an additional school.
And just to be clear, I mean, there are multiple options for what could be done, and so part of what we're hoping to do over these next couple months is use this public process to get input on those, right? One is increase class size and expand the common areas in many, many building projects simultaneously. One is to have a few building projects, right? Try to add 9 onto a few different buildings. We're just doing Devotion. Pierce is already spilling into rental space. Lawrence just got done. I think New Lincoln only took a few, and that was a strange space because you had basically a 3.3 section school, which is very bizarre educationally and, maybe not tenable. You have to put other things there rather than K-8 to make it work. Runkle's out of space without eminent domain. We just did that project. So, that doesn't leave that many. It leaves Heath, and it leaves Driscoll, and it leaves Baker. Heath, there's space, but the redistricting implications we all saw the map. So if you added a section at Heath, there's land, but the redistricting is complicated. If you added at Driscoll, it's very challenging, without looking at the common spaces and looking at play space, all the things that we talked about, a little while back in terms of you really need to do a feasibility study, which, town meeting voted that money to do the feasibility study to say what would you need to do to that building. And then the same thing with Baker. Baker, you could potentially put a little school on the other side of the field, 2-section school. There are different things you could theoretically do, but every one of them involves many, many multiple building projects at the same time, the cost estimates. And one thing we did talk about so anyway, there's many options, and we are hoping to use this public process to get reactions, because obviously we do need what if this doesn't work, it will require votes of town meeting, it'll require an override, so we do want to use this process to get a clear plan B. And the other thing that I'll say is there was a potential item in the CIP to do a many hundreds of thousands of dollars, perhaps $1 million study to figure out really what would expand in place cost for this number, because you have to do site assessments of every single building. And I think the initial sense of the schools capital subcommittee was that $1 million was a lot of money to spend for a feasibility study on expand in place to get that down to a very specific number. I mean, I guess if we hear in this process that there's a tremendous public appetite for that, that wasn't voted yet, but we could talk about it. But it just seemed like a lot of money to spend on something that seemed, at least at the obvious level, not, that it wouldn't meet the need given how much the enrollment has expanded since B-Space and some of the other factors. So anyway, that's a short summary of some of the conversations we've had so far.
Open it up. Ms. Stone.
I don't have a lot to add. I thought what David Pollock said was extremely compelling, and for me, it's never been a question of what do we do if we don't decide not to build a ninth school. For me, it has always been, how do we get to this very clear conclusion that we reached? Can we, in fact, build a ninth school? It has always been that has always been, for me, been the question. Is there, ever since MGT told us in whatever it was, 2008, that we needed a ninth school, but there wasn't a good site for it. So to be here and to actually have something, I mean, this is an extraordinary accomplishment, Susan. Thank you so much, and Kara also, just for what has been put into this. No, it's not easy, and heaven knows there's a long way to go, but what this is saying to us is we can do this. And so for me, I would like to say, great, let's finally do this, and see what it's going to take and where the best site is. But to know that we can is just a tremendous leap forward, and I'm very, very excited to be there.
Any other questions, comments? Ms. Heller.
I'm not sure how to work these things. I'm not so technologically able. For me, the issue is that we have this burgeoning school enrollment, and I believe that it's not fair to the kids who are in the current elementary schools to pack them even more than they are now. They're jammed. And with kids having lunch at 10 o'clock in the morning, that's just doesn't even seem to be that healthy to me. So I think that the numbers speak for themselves, and we need to respond to that, and we need to respond to it in a responsible way. And I commend Susan Silverberg and Kara Brute for coming, for doing this work, because I do think they have come up with some excellent alternatives. Not perfect, but nothing in life is perfect. And I think we need to move forward with this and settle on one of these and go forward in as quickly as we can, so that we're not leaving kids in these situations of, or have faced with the terrible consequence of having to raise class size. That's, to me, is unacceptable.
Fisher-Mueller.
I just want to remind you that class size isn't just about that teacher-to-student ratio. It's about the physical space and the students in there. And while you may be able to fit more desks and chairs, that space does not become conducive then to the kind of educational program that we provide and want to provide. Our classrooms are dynamic, they have workstations, students move around, multiple students talking at one time. We need adequate storage space, we need space for the additional adults that come with the students, around math specialists or literacy specialists, psychologists. If we have classrooms where we truly want to be inclusive, they have to be spaces where students with disabilities, if they have physical disabilities, need to be able to move around and move through. So I just want to give you a little bit more detail around class size.
Great.
Ms. Daly?
Yeah, I think all of us hoped or wished that we were seeing a bubble in that as that enrollment kept growing, but it's clear when you look at the numbers and you look at the trends, and particularly when I look at the huge number of daycare centers around town that seem to be absolutely full, as well as our schools. It's clear that this problem isn't going away, and the numbers that Dr. Connolly gave us are credible as to, where we're going with that. And that being said, I think that we need a ninth school.
Turn it around.
I'm not going to get used to this. Kara, are there any questions regarding whether to do a ninth school versus other options?
Yes, there are two. The first one is, could we solve the 10:30 a.m. lunches issue now if it is truly a pressing issue before waiting 5+ years and spending tens of millions of dollars?
Well,
I think the first solution would be
You're fine, don't touch it.
the possibility of not using the cafeteria for lunch, which is, it has its negatives, but its positives. If you didn't schedule all the students into the cafeteria, you could have lunch programs going on at the same time for different grade levels. But that has an impact on the classroom, has an impact on the whole lunch program, and it would not be our ideal situation. That's many times used as a temporary solution. In fact, at the Devotion School, K-4 population potentially moving to a building in Coolidge Corner, we may have, or in modulars during construction phase, we may have lunch in the classrooms. Now, that may work for 1 or 2 years, but you may not want that as a long-term solution.
Dr. Fisher-Mueller.
And additionally, it's a supervision issue as well. Our teachers have their duty-free lunch at the same time when students have lunch. If students are eating in the classroom, in each of those individual classrooms, there needs to be supervision in each of those individual classrooms, and we wouldn't need the contract on that.
Mr. Pollack? I'd just like to speak a little about the philosophical approach in relation to answering this question that the capital subcommittee is trying to hone and implement. And that approach is that looking historically over the 10-year period when we've found the place to land 57 and counting additional sections. It started out relatively painless. There were a lot of underutilized spaces, and some of it was cost shifting or pain shifting or just belt tightening. For instance, one of the most dramatic ways in which classrooms were achieved was by taking away dedicated space that was being used by the extended day programs throughout the town. So when my children were at Driscoll School, there were 2 classrooms that extended day had 365 days of the year. They just had them because they weren't needed. And there was additional spaces that they had under the same circumstances. And all of those spaces pretty much have, even down to like closets just about, have gone away throughout the school system. So that was sort of the easiest first step, where it wasn't really hard to make the fiscal decisions about how to address real needs. What we're trying to do, that's over, and now we spent $4 million to build 4 classrooms at Lawrence. that we just opened in September. So these decisions are very costly. And the discipline that we're trying to be really, really deliberate about is to only spend that kind of money on super high quality permanent solutions. And that when we're doing temporary solutions, bridge solutions, that we want to be equitable and we want to maintain educational outcomes and be high quality, but we want to do it in ways that keep the powder dry, that save our financial resources so that they can be invested in the long-term solutions. And we have some really good examples of things that we've just done. The cost of the 2 modular classrooms that have just been opened at Baker School over 5 years is like $400,000 total, and it's leased, so it's even played out over time. And then they'll go away. And we're leasing space, 3 new classrooms plus support spaces for Pierce in a rental building right next to Pierce, just outside the windows here. And that's a relatively short-term lease. Now, what we're trying to do tonight is move ahead with putting in place the long-term solution that these short-term solutions bridge us toward so that they can eventually go away. So while we are very our ears are open and we're very careful to listen to staff when they bring problems to us that need to be solved right away. The problem of 5 lunch periods at Driscoll and 5 lunch periods at Baker, while we've heard that it's challenging, school department staff has not come to the capital subcommittee and said, this is intolerable, this cannot be sustained for another year. We need a capital solution now to reduce the number of lunch periods, and we take our guidance from the school department, and then we help them solve the problems that need to be solved.
Ms. Bruton, there's another question?
Yeah, there's one more related to this, whether or not to build a night school, and that's how about 10 schools and build the top 2? How about 10 schools and build the top 2?
Yeah. Do you want me to do that one? Build 9th and 10th. A 9th and 10th
Build
school?
2.
So one of the questions that we get a lot is what is the risk of overbuilding? And so just to be clear as to what is not included in these 27 classrooms might be helpful. One thing that is not included is the beeps, bringing beeps back into the building. And there are 11 of those, I think, in rentals. So that's not included. We're not giving extended day dedicated space. We are not dealing with suboptimal classrooms. Suboptimals are ones, a number of them are, suboptimals are getting dealt with in the devotion renovation, but we're not dealing with the others. For example, walking through one active classroom to get to another active classroom, which is disruptive. I think we are dealing with the science lab with no water. Anyway, there's a variety of ones. So I think we're dealing with music being held in the auditorium, but anyway, there are a variety that just aren't perfect, and we're not dealing with all those. We're not reducing class size back to where it was before the enrollment started to go up. We are not bringing the 40 staff back into the buildings that we've just moved to Webster Place. So there are, just to be incredibly clear, there are a lot of things that are not getting solved with this 27, but this 27 is absolutely a big piece of the solution. So is a 10 school, there are many other things here, and I think it's a community decision about the priorities to build a 10th school, but it seems that at least from the need of the 27 here and the need of the high school, those two things are absolutely top priorities, and so it doesn't seem that bringing beeps back is going to outweigh the high school anytime soon. And so that would be a short answer, which is we're not overbuilding, that's for sure.
I think you just hit the nail on the head, Susan, when you were talking about the high school. We all know that we have to address the enrollment issues that are moving up to the high school, and that is going to be an expensive proposition. And so we're talking about a 9th school plus a major high school project, and both of those we would have to go to the public and ask for them to vote for debt exclusion overrides. And we have had very good support from Mass School Building Assistance with the projects we have done to date, but we suspect that, there may be a point at which they say, okay, Brookline, you've had your share. and then we would have to do perhaps one of these projects without any help from them. So it's the reason, no, we're not contemplating a 10th school, I think, as for many of us, is a simple financial reality that, what it's fair to ask the voters to take on, and what we can do in our budget situation. Because you have to realize, and we're thinking about this, and this is maybe not as obvious, if you're not, we're crunching those numbers all the time going through the budgets. But when you add an additional school, you are adding administrative staff, you are adding janitorial staff, you're taking on a number of expenses that go into the operating budget, and and teachers, obviously. So it's not just the cost of that building, but it's also the implications for your operating budget. And I think, as I say, with the additions we've got coming online, plus the high school, that's a lot, I think, for the voters to swallow already.
Scotto.
When I, when I looked at this, when I first saw this, I thought, yes, indeed, I see where those two schools could be built, and each one is solving a different problem that we have. One is really dealing with North Brookline. The other is dealing with the possibility in South Brookline. Now, while I completely understand what Nancy is saying about the implications for the tax rate, the money it will take to build this, if we are not going to have 10 schools, then the town needs to look at their own policies about how we're dealing with growth. We need to get the 40B question under control, because when you build a 40B, you add certainly affordable housing, but you add much more non-affordable housing. And if you look around town at what's happening in the multi-family districts, you see that many of those big old houses are being made into, instead of one dwelling or two, they're being made into 3 or 4. So that what you're doing is you are adding places for people to move in who will have children. And while we do want to have turnover in Brookline, we want to have a vibrant place to live, and we do want to have affordable housing, we need to be more in control of what is happening in terms of our growth. So I think it is incumbent upon the town to think about what we can do in terms of zoning and in terms of controlling the proliferation of 40Bs, so that we in Brookline can be more in control of where we can put affordable housing and have less of it in the hands of the developers who will put it exactly where they want.
Stone.
So I just want to quickly applaud the fact that the question was asked at all, because it gives me the sense that that the public has grasped the size of the problem, which is an incredibly important first step for us. And the good news is that if, in fact, we continue to grow at the rate we've been growing and have need in the long run for another school, and I emphasize long run, that this study has really positioned us to answer that question of whether and where we might be looking as a town for that really completely and really well. And so we have a tremendous resource in this study, having looked so broadly across town at what our options are, so that so thank you so much for the question. And again, I think the best news here is that we do have options should we need to go in that direction.
So what I'd like to do is propose a motion. Oh, no, not on this topic. I'd like to propose a motion on the construction of a 9th school, and the motion is this. Construction of a 9th school is the preferred solution to addressing continued enrollment growth in the elementary grades in the Brookline Public Schools. Staff is directed to conduct further planning and analysis in support of this decision. Any discussion? Then I'm going to take the votes of the two boards separately. So first, I'll take the vote of the Board of Selectmen. Selectman Daley?
Aye. Oh, sorry.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair of the board votes aye.
Selectman Franco.
Oh, yes. And Selectman Franco, after consultation with the State Ethics Commission, he's been advised that participation in the he's been advised to recuse himself from participation in the site selection process, as his participation would violate Section 19 of Chapter 268A. So he's not here tonight. School Committee.
All right. Ms. Tran? Yes. Ms. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Mr. Pollak?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Ms. Scotto?
Yes.
Mr. Orlovsky?
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Chang?
Yes.
I will note that Dr. Jackson is here not because she has recused herself, but because she is in Virginia with a previously scheduled matter.
So now let's move on to, do we want to accept the staff's suggestion on the top two choices? Any discussion or questions? Yes.
Yes, I will. I've made this argument before, and when we've been in executive session, but I wanted to publicly make my argument one last time. I realize my ship seems to be sinking, but I'm going to give it one last shot. I am very favorable toward the idea of a concept school. I think that science and math is an area in which our school curriculum could use enhancement. And I like the old Lincoln School as a location for a concept school because it's the most centrally located. I also like it because if at some point our enrollment does go down dramatically and we say we don't really need 9 elementary schools, that one is in the best location because of its being more central to become the early childhood center or fill some other need at that time. I appreciate that we have, it's been a very valuable resource as swing space. I think, though, in part, we, for many years after Proposition 2.5 went into effect, we did not maintain our buildings very well, and some of our having to do total rehabs on buildings like this one, because they had deteriorated quite a bit over the years, was a legacy of that time period. I think we have a much more robust program to maintain our buildings now, and frankly, I would be shocked if you proposed to me in 10 or 20 years that we redo Town Hall once again. So I think a lot of those buildings that we've done, we've done, and we wouldn't be doing major projects on them again. I do realize there are some, the plan is now to use the old Lincoln for the high school when Devotion gets done with it. And I would prefer a solution that adds on nearer to the main campus of the high school. My son was one of the kids who was in Old Lincoln for his freshman year when we last did work on the high school. And he happened to be in a more advanced Spanish class than the freshman level, and he used to literally run from Old Lincoln back to the high school and be late every time he went to Spanish class. So I think that, we could do better in terms of an adjunct building for the high school, and, we should get that underway as well, and so that we wouldn't need Old Lincoln for the high school. And, for other needs, I think we would have to probably do some continued rental of, for instance, Coolidge House for a while. But So I would like to see Old Lincoln stay in the mix while we're still working on this.
Ms. Stone?
So, leaving aside Selectman Daley's visions of what could be done with Old Lincoln, I do strenuously disagree with, with that vision. But I actually wanted to speak to the advantages that I see in these two sites in particular. And they are that neither one is renovating an existing building. And that gives us a tremendous opportunity in Brookline, because it means we can work with the community to build new, and to build not only, it's an opportunity not just to build a new school, but to build a great new building. And there are so many people in Brookline so devoted to what it means to build a great new building, from the green opportunities to the interesting uses of space opportunities, to just all of the things that presents us. I just see a much more vibrant community process and community involvement in building a new school, and both of these sites give us that opportunity. So I would really encourage us to explore them as the sites to consider.
Before we have continued discussion of these options, I'm wondering if there are questions from the board and then from the public related to this question. Then I'll go to the public. Susan?
Specifically related to this question?
Yeah. Were there other questions about the site selection that might help us in the discussion?
Well, there was a question, what areas in the town have the largest school population, and would it not make sense to build a new school in that area? And I think Kara can also speak to this, but I think that was the intent of the initial target area map, is that those are the areas with most of the school population, and so we did indeed look at sites within the part of town where that was. Okay. Let's see. Others that kind of relate directly to that. Let's see. In evaluating the quarter mile for walking distance, did you use distance as the crow flies or actual distance required to walk? And I think, yeah, and so there are two pieces to that. I think the initial target areas had kind of ridge lines shown around Corey Hill and other places, Summit Avenue, where it was difficult. So we took that into account in terms of school assignment, is that correct? And so while the quarter mile is the quarter mile in the circle, looking at school assignment and what were those difficult kind of barriers to movement were taken into account when we looked at school sites. Okay, let's see.
And just to note, the quarter mile was a planning department estimate. That is not a school committee policy or anything like that.
It's just based on kind of good planning principles.
It's as the crow flies, because that's how you do it easily. Not that you cannot actually map every child's walking pattern.
I'll also throw the reminder out again, not to fixate on the redistricting maps. Those are just illustrations. If any of these sites happen, we would be going through a full public process and full evaluation, and what you see there may not and will probably not be what happens in reality.
And can I just underscore that as strenuously as possible? Anyone in this room, please tell all your friends, and if you're watching online, tell all your friends, because the process of doing this is there are multiple public meetings, you sit there with maps, you move lines house by house. I mean, it's incredibly detailed, and the buffer zone process, I don't know how many meetings there were. People at this table have scars on their back from it. It was a wonderful exercise in democracy, and this was a planning department set of estimates for, like, is this even reasonable? So please tell all your friends, do not anchor on these redistricting maps. They are just to assume, is this even possible? So some of them are gerrymandered and look insane, so just please know that.
No, I just want to quickly add, though, when you say we, I think you mean the school committee, Because
Well,
that's,
It's not.
we don't do
So do you want to talk about this, Rebecca? Because it's not only a school committee that does redistricting.
So typically, when we have looked at, we haven't done a full redistricting for forever. So, so what you look at is the process that we've used for drawing the buffer zone lines. And it is in fact created by the school, it's an ad hoc committee created by the school committee, that's exactly right. But it always necessarily involves members of the schools community, a principal is always there, there's a parent always there, we always involve planning, we always involve
Can you do it?
Yeah, even people
I think
like me.
Neil did it.
That was my first involvement.
He was on the advisory committee. So it is a broad and inclusive process. It is always done in open session.
I'm just trying to say to people, don't send your emails on redistricting to the selectmen.
Don't send them at all. Don't send them at all. The answer is these are not the final maps. We can't go down that road because that's not what this is. That's not fair to ask of Civic Moxie. It's not fair to ask of Kara. That's not what this was.
There will be lots and lots of time for those discussions.
Right. They were meant as a starting point to understand how all of these worked and compared to each other.
Right.
And there, a lot of thought went into them, but they're not final by any means.
Mr. Pollock?
On the narrow question about the quarter-mile radius, which was drawn, as we've heard, in a circle, I would just offer the observation that in the whole sort of now 30-year-old new urbanism movement that looks at walkability and looks at American towns pre-World War II and before interstate highways and all of that, very often the standard of measurement is a half-mile radius. So the quarter-mile radius is really at the close, easy end of what's of contemporary definitions of walkability. So then, if you say it's quarter mile as the crow flies, it is really a good measure of a walk. Of a reasonable walk, even for very short legs.
Well, that's what I was going to say, for very short legs, because we live within a quarter of a mile of Driscoll, and it's 0.6 to actually get there for my tiny little legs, my children's little legs.
And they walk.
So anyway, and they walk.
And it's more than half a mile.
And we walk, right. So let's just, so the quarter of a mile, we're going to leave it.
Susan?
I'm going to read some others just about some of the other sites because it's related. The Parsons Field site appears to have been rejected due to high costs of relocating Northeastern to a new site. If Northeastern were paid fair market value, would that resolve the issue? So eminent domain, if they didn't agree to the sale of that site, and they've just done a major kind of rehabilitation and restoration there, by law, you have to not only pay the fair market value, but find a suitable site, a replacement site, which, is a big barrier there. And considering that along with where it was located, those two things together kind of weighed and pulled it out of the top considerations for site. Let's see. Kara answered this, were costs of relocating town uses, particularly the valuable uses made of old Lincoln School, considered? Yes, they're kind of listed in the considerations in terms of what they were. Will all 6 options alleviate the current school problem in the same way in terms of and I think all 6 options do, because all 6 options are 100,000 square feet. They're 550 student school.
Right.
So they do.
And just to be clear, that's growth in North Brookline and in South Brookline, just so people know. We're not only talking, these sites are where they are, but they do solve North and South Brookline by design.
Are timelines much larger for mixed-use schools? So if you're talking about timeline from the initial decision to go ahead to completion of construction, I would say that the mixed-use school and the concept theme-based schools are going to be longer because they're not the kind of business as usual here, and they take partnerships. So all of the mixed-use schemes that we presented, looking at the Village School and the Harvard Street School, would take longer because both of those really depend on on partnership. Certainly the village school with Stop and Shop depend on a partnership with the existing use. You can't do that if they don't want to go ahead and do a partnership and a rebuild. So that's going to be more complex, and both of them have phasing, so even the construction phasing might look different. Were loss of tax revenues and impact on tax rolls included as a cost? So they were not included in the actual construction costs, the conceptual costs, but they were included in the considerations for each project. And we actually, Kara and the town did estimates. Kara did estimates of what kind of potential future redevelopment of commercial sites that loss of revenue might be. And so we have looked at that, and those are not actually redacted from the report right now, so you can see what those are for each site. Let's see. Will the ninth school only solve the expected growth in the next 5 to 6 years, or also alleviate the current problem of the amount of students in current schools? No, I don't know.
The latter, you built it on 650 in kindergartners, right?
Right.
So it's that, so this would alleviate the conditions except for the ones I mentioned earlier.
Okay, and someone wanted the clarification of how schools define suboptimal space.
So there are a variety of definitions. The short answer is that they are not ideal, but they are not bad enough that we would absolutely say you cannot run a classroom here. Okay, so it's something without, a classroom without windows, or I think there's one without windows, right? There's one kind of in basements where you walk in and the first thing you see is a wall and you have to kind of go around it to get to the classroom. Pedagogy is not impacted. It's not great, but you can still run a good pedagogical experience there. There were some that were bad enough that they were actually impacting pedagogy. So those were the ones that we for sure tried to build for in the Devotion Project, alleviate a number of those. And Dr. Connolly can explain what those are. But anyway, and then there are smaller classrooms, right? There's an undersized issue. Is it small enough that it impacts pedagogy? Maybe, probably not, especially if you take out, make that a smaller class size because it's a smaller classroom. So anyway, there are a variety of definitions. We did have a first pass at this from Peter Rowe, the former Deputy Superintendent for Finance and Administration. There were a number of questions about it, and so those were being dealt with, and I think Mary Ellen Dunn, who is his replacement, is going to take a whack at those with Dr. Connolly to see if there are any more that we absolutely need to prioritize at the top of the list versus say, given all the other things we're trying to do, is probably not something we're going to address.
There's something related. Where did the 550 student capacity for a ninth school come from? Why not 650 or 700?
Right, so a four-section school is certainly something that, if we went there, could be looked at. But I think the initial idea was a three-section school, especially for some of these properties, is my
I
understanding.
think it was 3 acre. We're looking at 3.5. We're looking at 3.5 acres in a 3-section school fits more easily on 3 acres of property. A four-section school would need a much larger footprint.
So 2 other questions perhaps to answer, and there are others here, but they're not directly related to this question, so we're trying to focus. Would we have to preserve the parking on the TJ Maxx site? Would they be willing to give that up? So the answer is yes, that they need to be able to conduct business there, and so that parking has to be replaced spot for spot. And if we left the TJ Maxx site and we're redeveloping the parking, and so if we didn't leave the TJ Maxx site, we would have had to find an alternative site for the store as well. So within all of those mixed-use schemes, all of the schemes really, we were trying to balance getting the appropriate parcel size for the school with the minimal amount of disruption or other challenges that had to be overcome around relocation of existing uses. Why can't construction, development costs, and related assumptions and info on costs included and excluded be disclosed? Disclosing would not compromise negotiations. I think that has to be answered by.
Yeah, that's not the advice we got from council.
Okay. I think that's probably it around this issue. Should we?
The next round are all kind of disparate, so what direction do you want to head in?
Are there any that you feel like rise to the top at this point, or can they be dealt with online, given the lateness of the hour?
Yeah, let me just try to run through. There are questions about, basically about our policy and what the rules are for residential housing and how to offset those. That's something I'd like to deal with online.
Okay.
Very specifically. I don't think that's kind of how do we, in the future, perhaps deal with some enrollment pressures. I can't help but say, though, that over the last 10 years, our housing units, as counted by the census, has actually gone down. Our school enrollment is going through the roof. We have construction permits all the time. Most of them are porch renovations, tearing down a two-story house, or a two-unit house to put up a three-unit house. The census has errors, but when it comes to, that's the data that the state looks at for affordable housing caps. And so our housing units overall have gone down in the last 10 years. I do think that we are seeing a bubble of development pressures related to 40B, and the closer we get to our 10%, the faster we're going to see everybody try to skid across the finish before getting there. So we are going to see, I think, a ramping up. Okay, no, sorry. As 40B. There was 2 questions about the high school. Where are things with the high school at the current site or new site, and how does the high school process interplay with the night school setting?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is we've submitted an SOI to the MSBA, which is alphabet soup, a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. We're hoping to get an answer back, Mr. Kleckner, this December, so we'll have a lot more information then. We've been asked, I may as well answer it now, we've been asked if we are not invited into partnership for the high school, what would we do? Would we advance this ninth school idea ahead of the high school idea? And I don't think I've heard any support for that. I think a lot of the discussion that I've heard is about resubmitting the high school, given that that is a much bigger project and a more expensive project and a pressing project as well. But that has not been decided. That's just been sort of water cooler talk. But anyway, we will find out in December. We'll go from there.
And then there's a question, did any of these site proposals take into account probable future large-scale developments, such as the Durgan Waldo site in Coolidge Corner, the new Dummer Street development, and the Crown and Shield development, which is a 40B? So this is a very important question. It's a good one. So as far as the total number of, good job, Lauren. as far as the total number of households with children in them that were modeled for purposes of GIS and, kind of filling up each school, they were the same. It was 550 additional school children flatline, based on school projections from school administration. However, when it came to modeling where are those kids going to pop up, we did a couple things. We said households, and these are assumptions because we don't have a crystal ball, but households that have school kids in them now are likely to have school kids in them, are more likely to have school kids in the future. Households that have preschoolers now, whose addresses we have and who GIS department, who did a bulk of this work, was able to locate. We said that's a probable location for growth. And then the third probable location for growth is where we know developments have been permitted or are, under construction as we speak. So to answer it affects the mapping, but not the overall school capacity. So, for example, we did include Hancock Village. We included the Dummer Street because it's under construction, as well as Crown and Shield. Durgan Waldo, I did not. We do not have a proposal, and I am hoping that it's mixed use at least.
But just to be clear on that, Kara, there are 2 appendices in here. One appendix talks about 650 kindergartners. That 650 kindergartners does not, just to clarify, does not include data from a different appendix. The different appendix said that there are going to be, 180 K through 8 children potentially from things. That is not included in the 650.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That's right. They're kind of totally separate things.
Right.
Scotto.
I have a question specifically about the Dummer Street housing. When you looked at the number of children projected to be in there, it said that you used the Trustman apartments. Many of those apartments are for people with disabilities or for the elderly, and I'm wondering how, in a building that size, you came up with the number you did unless you were counting all of the Trustmen and dividing by the total number.
We did also speak with Brookline Housing Authority in doing these numbers. It's important for us for several reasons to understand, and this is something Fran Price used to keep track of, way back. So we have kind of long-term data of units that are restricted besides income, whether it's for seniors or for veterans or that kind of thing. So I'll just say in concert with BHA. There's one more question here. Did any of these, oh, sorry, that's not the one. Can you clarify eminent domain relocation? Are you saying you have to pay fair market value and also buy their replacement land, or just the cost of relocating that business? That's a good question. I am not an eminent domain attorney. We do have one on staff with town council who so far has given us very good advice. We do need to pay fair market value for the property. Separately, any uses that have to be relocated, we would be responsible for paying for. So let's give the example very quickly of TJ Maxx. We would be paying the property owner, who's different from TJ Maxx, fair market value. If TJ Maxx needed to relocate, which in our concepts we're not showing, if we showed something else, we would need to pay for them to relocate. We would not need to pay their monthly lease that they're paying the property owner currently, but we would need to find that site for them.
So the question we're getting asked a lot, given the season, is the Lars Anderson warrant article that's in front of town meeting. So do you want to just address the relationship between the sketch on the Isabel School property and the warrant article boundaries?
Because we didn't know what the result of that warrant article was going to be. We still, oh, sorry. What we did was we put the school and the related kind of on-site, probably K through 2 playground, trying to place it. We put that in an area that is outside of the proposed restricted area for Article 97, so that it would work either way. I will say there are other options for the school at Lars Anderson, but we worked within those constraints, knowing what the discussion was within the town, and also really trying to limit incursion on open space within the site. Does that answer the question? So here we are, and the school is right along the border of the Boston property and the Brookline property. All of it is owned by Brookline, but we've kind of tucked it in, so it really did direct what the building configuration is, because we were trying to fit it within, and there's a curved line. It's a little bit hard to see. I'm not sure I have a laser pointer here. There's a curved line that follows the restriction. Does that go at the top? This curved line here is the restriction line. This is outside of that open space, the proposed warrant article. And so we've kept everything within this.
There is the Lars Anderson Auto Museum is a historic building or not?
Yes, and that's right here. So we've kept that. There's another building that we were told. So there was quite a bit of consultation with the Historic Commission, with staff, about what is historic in this part of the site. And so we've worked around those historic elements, and then have tried to incorporate in. This is the relocation of the DPW shed. This isn't where it is right now. As well as some existing buildings that would have to stay.
I mean, so one of the things that I think we're going to get asked is if that line were moved, well, we've already heard this, if it were moved a little bit, is this the best building you can build, basically, in this general vicinity? Or were you trying to hew very closely and build basically right up against a couple of lines? Because I think, I don't know if there's any support for building at the top of the hill and the whole thing, but there definitely are other options in this part of where the sheds are, and I guess it seems like a gerrymandered building around a line.
It is. It is not the best. I'm not sure. No, it's not the best possible site that you could build.
Even in that little area, is what you're saying? Okay.
I don't think so. It would need some more investigation. That's a bit premature, but that's not where we originally put it. And so there is gerrymandering that's going on here. We know it can work. Whether it's the best solution design-wise or even making use of the site or relation to the open space, no.
Okay. And can you just explain for people why you're on the Brookline side and not on the Boston side?
So evidently the state regulations, if you're going to get MSBA funding, as we understand it, for a Brookline school, the school has to be on town of Brookline property. Because it was one of the first questions we asked, could a ninth school be adjacent in some way? But this is where it comes up. And so this is the Boston-Brookline border right here. So the DPW building can be there.
Right. There's also another issue. Then Boston would have design authority and zoning.
And they will indeed have permitting, authority over a relocated DPW shed, but not the school.
But we'd still have to go through it for all those pieces. We have to go through the Boston process for anything we build on the Boston side. Is that basically the idea?
That's correct.
So regardless of MSBA. And this really is, again, back to the idea of, high school versus ninth school use. This really is only the size of a 550 child, however you define it, building.
That's correct.
It's not larger.
If I could say, and I was conscious of how much time I was taking, but both this scheme and the cottage farm scheme really open up a wealth of opportunities around green building, not only green in terms of sustainable construction methods and materials, but where they're located, and thinking about the relationship of the school to the natural environment and to the open space, and how that feeds into the curriculum, and what that is, and how open space becomes accessible to a lot of school children, and by extension, their families and kind of community. And so we think that there's a wealth of opportunities in these two schemes about really thinking deeply about what that means. So we do think there are opportunities here, and I think there's room to explore, where this building would be that would enhance Lars Anderson and the overall enjoyment of it and understanding of it as a historic landscape.
That's very helpful, because I think we are trying to build with a, long-term vision in mind, 50-year vision, not a, squeezed in is a technically possible sort of idea.
So I'd like to propose...
I'm sorry, Neil, I need to add one piece of information to that, and that is that and Erin has brought this up in some of her discussions. I do not have the map with me right now, but everybody needs to understand that there is also a preservation restriction at the top of the hill, which Erin has followed this boundary line when it gets over here. So the entire top of the hill, with the exception of where the mansion used to be, up by the parking lot, is all under a preservation restriction, meaning that Carter would probably be the best person to explain that more. But, this goes beyond zoning, beyond our local laws or permitting. It's a property restriction, and any building there would need some serious review by the state Mass Historic. Is there anything else I should say? Okay.
Can you repeat that? Just
it requires substantial negotiation, she said. But how big was the house? I picked up on that house.
we did, we looked at the old drawings, the site plans, and the photographs as much as we could. It was substantial, and there were the sunken gardens there as well. They were all, I'm just going to say it, obliterated. And so, there's a lot of that landscape. I cried, actually, when I looked at all of those photographs. It was substantial.
So that it could be a possibility. Thank you.
I think we're ready for a vote. It's starting to get late. And I'm going to propose a motion, and I'll accept an amendment, and then we'll vote on the amendment, and then the main motion.
Okay.
Okay. My motion is staff is directed to focus their efforts for additional due diligence and analysis at this time for the following 2 sites identified in the 9th Elementary School Site Identification Study. The first one is Site A, the Cottage Farm School, and the second one is Site F, the so-called Isabel School.
Second.
I'll move to amend to include, I'm going to say the old Lincoln School, because I don't think the Walnut Street people want us to think of Walnut Street as the main entrance, as a concept school.
So first, we'll vote on the motion to...
You need to ask for a second.
Second? I'll second. No motion should fail for lack of a second.
Thank you, Neil.
Yes?
I just wanted to know one thing for the committee. I'm probably going to abstain from the vote. I think it could be viewed as not a vote for 2 of 6, but 2 out of the entire field that was looked at. And I represent and work for one of the owners of one of those sites.
Okay. So first is the motion to amend, and we'll poll the 2 boards separately. So I'll first poll the Board of Selectmen. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
No.
Selectman Green?
No.
Chair votes no.
Ms. Stram?
No.
Ms. Stone?
No.
Mr. Glover is going to abstain. Mr.
No.
Pollock? I vote no, I'm sorry. Ms. Scotto? Ms. Chalupsky?
It was a good try. No.
No.
Mr. Chang, okay.
Okay, so the main motion is for the 2 sites to be the focus of our due diligence and analysis.
As for discussion. Is there final discussion?
Any final discussion?
The only thing that I would like to say is that this is not a final decision.
Right.
Just so we're really clear. The motion, we talked about, Neil and I talked about this wording very carefully, and it's, staff is directed to focus their efforts for additional due diligence on these 2 sites. It is not saying that the other 4 are out forever and ever. It is saying that this seems to be the focus of our efforts. We're going to hear from the public for the next couple of months, and we will likely take a much more specific motion later, but at this point, it's a statement of preference, hopefully strong preference, but it's not a formal vote to exclude. Is that fair?
That is fair, and that is the intent. So,
So maybe, Ms. Daly, you can convince somebody out there.
So I'll poll first the Board of Selectmen. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Ms. Stram?
Aye.
Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Glover abstains?
Abstain.
Mr. Pollock?
Aye.
I vote aye. Ms. Scotto?
Aye.
Chalupsky?
Yes.
Mr. Chang?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, so Kara, can you remind us of
Yes.
the public process going forward?
I think this is it.
Nope, that's not it.
Oh, you're right, sorry. So over the next couple of weeks is what you're focusing on.
Between now and December.
And again, this is on the town website. If you go on the town's just homepage right now at the bottom where we put kind of most frequently asked items, you'll see a link to the 9th school study. And on that page is the entire study, this presentation, both presentations will be up there tonight. And also on there is the public meetings. So the public meetings that we're talking about, again, is Tuesday, November 3rd, from 6 to 9 p.m. That's in the Denning Room, which is the lower level of 11 Pierce, the health building. That's the first kind of open house style meeting.
It's not going to be a structured lecture kind of thing.
There's a Facebook connection to it.
There'll be posters.
Yeah, so we're basically going to break apart the report into different topics and discussions. Having these questions tonight will help us kind of figure out how best to
Folks will be
break it
there,
down.
you can ask questions of.
Of real staff.
Right.
The second meeting will be Thursday, November 12th, 7 to 9 a.m. We're trying to capture the before work, before drop-off crowd, and that'll be in this room. And then we've got December.
Kara, are you going to do one in the evening that night also?
We are not.
We're
So
not.
the evening one is going to be November 3rd.
Okay.
The morning one is going to be November 12th.
Okay, great.
Those are the two open house style meetings.
Okay.
And then December 3rd is probably a more formal public hearing format.
Right.
And then there's going to be a present,
So if that's a school committee night, is that appropriate to have the big public hearing on the night when you guys might not be able to attend?
no, they are,
No,
it's going to
that
be a
would be our
joint.
meeting.
We will
Okay.
attend.
Okay. I thought you were saying you had a conflict.
No.
No.
Okay.
We would do what we did tonight. Tonight, we did an hour-and-a-half meeting as fast as humanly possible, and then this.
And then, in addition to those public meetings and the public hearing, there's going to be a presentation to the advisory committee on November 2nd, a presentation to the Preservation Commission on the 10th, November 10th, and a presentation to the Park and Recreation Commission on November 10th.
And so then the idea is that we would meet back in joint executive session, joint open session the week of December 15th. Is that right? I think the selectmen have a meeting Tuesday, we have a meeting Thursday, so one of those two nights, we'll figure out who can attend. And we'll sort of summarize all this public feedback and figure out where we are. Okay.
Okay, I think.
At the risk of opening up a can of worms, any other burning issues that absolutely have to get addressed tonight? All right.
And let's adjourn.
We're adjourned. Thank you very much.
With those votes.